Look around you today, and you will see a world entirely dominated by a single kind of human. We have built cities of glass and steel, mapped the ocean floors, and left footprints on the moon. We are so utterly alone at the top of the cognitive pyramid that we have begun to believe our solitude was inevitable. We think of ourselves as a destined survivors, the ultimate culmination of a 2-million-year evolutionary march that was always leading, predictably and unswervingly, to us. But this is a trick of perspective, an illusion born of the fact that we are the last ones left to tell the story. The truth is far stranger, far more chaotic, and infinitely more beautiful. For the vast majority of our history, humanity was not a monologue. It was a chorus. Welcome to Earth's documentary. Today, we are traveling back not to the dawn of time, but to a very specific, pivotal moment in the deep past, 300,000 years ago. If you could rewind the clock to this exact moment and walk across the continents, you would find a world teeming with human diversity, a planet where at least 8 or 9 distinct species of humans lived in parallel. You would encounter neighbors who were undeniably human, yet radically different from anything you see in a mirror today. Imagine standing on a rugged coastline in a world where the oceans sit 120 meters lower than they do right now, exposing massive land bridges that connect continents and islands. If you walked north into the crushing, bitter cold of Ice Age Europe, you would find stocky, immensely powerful figures huddled around hearths in deep limestone caves. These are the Neanderthals. Their chests are barrel-shaped, their noses broad, perfectly engineered by evolution to draw in and warm the freezing air. They are not mindless brutes. They are apex predators, master toolmakers, and survivors of a climate that would kill an unprotected modern human in a matter of hours. They have claimed this frozen world for themselves, and they will hold it for hundreds of thousands of years. Now, turn your gaze far to the south, to the southern tip of Africa. Here, deep underground, something entirely different is happening. In a pitch-black cave system, accessible only through a network of terrifyingly narrow, jagged chutes, moves a creature called Homo naledi. They are small, barely 5 feet tall, with brains no larger than orange. Yet, their hands look almost identical to yours, capable of fine, delicate manipulation. Their shoulders are built for climbing ancient, towering trees, but their feet are built to walk for miles across the savannah. And in the absolute darkness of these caves, they are doing something that defies everything we thought we knew about small-brained creatures. They are bringing their dead into the deepest chambers, navigating the perilous dark for reasons we can only guess at. Travel east, across the sprawling landmass of Asia, and the picture becomes even more complex. On the island of Java, moving through open woodlands and river valleys, is the great elder of the human family, Homo erectus. They are the longest surviving human species to ever walk the earth. By the time our story begins 300,000 years ago, they have already been here for over 1.5 million years. They have seen ice ages come and go. They have tamed fire, and they have walked out of Africa long before anyone else dared to leave. They are the ultimate survivors, yet their time is slowly drawing to a close. Keep moving east, across deep ocean trenches, to a tiny, isolated island in Indonesia called Flores. Here, evolution has created a world that feels like a fairy tale. Wandering through the dense tropical canopy are humans who stand only 3 feet tall. Homo floresiensis, the Hobbits. They hunt miniature, dwarfed elephants. They share their island with giant, carnivorous lizards and enormous rats. They have tiny brains, yet they make sharp, deadly stone tools and command fire. They are proof that evolution does not always build bigger. Sometimes, to survive, it builds smaller. And somewhere in the high, breathless altitudes of the Tibetan Plateau, where the air is thin and the winters are merciless, another group of humans is quietly adapting. The Denisovans. We have never found a complete skeleton of a Denisovan. We know them almost entirely as ghosts, identified by fragments of DNA extracted from a finger bone, a jawbone, a single tooth. Yet, they are spread across a massive territory, their bloodline adapting to the extreme cold of the mountains and the humid heat of Southeast Asian jungles. They are a phantom species, living in the shadows, waiting for the day they will cross paths with us. And deeper still, hidden in the genetic codes of people living today in West Africa, are whispers of yet another lineage, a ghost species we have never found a fossil for, a group of humans who walked the savannas and forests, interbreeding with the ancestors of modern humans, leaving behind only invisible genetic fingerprints. This was the reality of the Earth, a tangled, overgrown bush of human life. We, Homo sapiens, were just a tiny, insignificant offshoot forming in the cradle of Africa. We were newcomers. We were untested. We had no special guarantee from the universe that we would be the ones to inherit the Earth. The Neanderthals had larger brains. Homo erectus had unmatched endurance and a million-year track record. The Denisovans possessed genetic adaptations for extreme environments. The Hobbits had incredible resilience. And yet, against all mathematical odds, we are here, and they are not. The silence of the world today is deafening. The central mystery that haunts the fossil record is a simple, terrifying question. What happened to them all? How did a planet bursting with human diversity become the exclusive domain of a single species? Before we can answer the question of how they died, we must understand how they lived. And to do that, we have to strip away centuries of human arrogance. We have to ask a fundamental question. What does it actually mean to be human? For the longest time, science and philosophy gave a very arrogant answer. To be human meant to be smart. It meant having a large, bulging brain case. We drew evolutionary charts that showed a neat, straight line, a small, stooped ape slowly standing up, its brain growing larger and larger until it became us. The pinnacle of creation. We defined humanity by our own reflection. But the Earth, in its infinite complexity, loves to destroy our neat little theories. When archaeologists dug into the dirt of Flores and found a 3-foot-tall human with a brain the size of chimpanzees, the old rules shattered. When they crawled into the Rising Star Cave in South Africa and found the small-brained Homo naledi potentially engaging in the ritual disposal of their dead, the straight line of progress snapped in half. We suddenly realized that humanity is not a single measurable trait. It is not defined simply by a large cerebral cortex. It is not just about walking on 2 legs. Our distant ancestors mastered that millions of years ago, long before they were truly human. It is not exclusively about using tools, because crows and chimpanzees use tools too. Being human, as the Earth remembers it, is a constellation of traits. It is a messy, beautiful adaptability. It includes the cold-hardened hunters of the North and the tree-climbing scavengers of the tropics. It includes those who built grand, roaring fires, and those who survived on remote, storm-swept islands. Evolution is not a train moving on tracks toward a specific destination. It is water, flowing blindly over a landscape, finding whatever path it can to keep moving. Evolution does not necessarily preserve the strongest or the smartest or the most beautiful. Often, it simply preserves the luckiest. It preserves the ones who happen to be standing in the right place when the climate suddenly shifts. The ones whose unique set of quirks happens to perfectly match a new, terrifying reality. We are sitting here today not because we were destined to be the kings of the Earth, but because our specific branch of the family tree somehow clung to the rock, while a hurricane of time and climate change snapped all the other branches, one by one, and sent them tumbling into the abyss of extinction. To truly comprehend the scale of this loss, we have to travel back down the trunk of that family tree. We have to meet the grand patriarch, the survivor, the wanderer who set the stage for every human story that followed, the species that looked at the horizon of Africa and decided to keep walking. Homo erectus. If you want to talk about success in human evolution, you do not look at Homo sapiens. You look at Homo erectus. We have been around for perhaps 300,000 years. A blink of an eye, Homo erectus endured for nearly 2 million years. Let that sink in. They lived so long, through so many epochs, that their lifespan dwarfs our entire existence by a massive factor. If our species manages to survive as long as Homo erectus did, we have another 1.7 million years ahead of us. Given how we handle our climate and our weapons, that seems like a highly unlikely fantasy. Homo erectus, by contrast, weathered multiple ice ages, brutal interglacials, devastating volcanic eruptions, magnetic pole shifts, and the rise and fall of countless formidable predators. They did this while maintaining a continuous presence across 2 massive continents. The first erectus walked the plains of East Africa nearly 2 million years ago. They were different from everything that came before them. Earlier hominins were a compromise between the trees and the ground. They walked upright, but they still had the long, curved arms and grasping toes of creatures who fled to the canopy when leopards prowled in the darkness. Homo erectus severed that final tie. They had longer legs, shorter arms, and a tall, slender build that looks instantly recognizable to us today. Walking upright was no longer a part-time strategy. It was their absolute commitment. Their bodies were engineered for a new, revolutionary behavior: endurance running. They possessed a nuchal ligament in the back of their necks to keep their heads stable while running, and sweat glands that allowed them to cool down while moving in the blistering midday sun. When the great cats of the savannah rested in the shade, exhausted by the heat, Homo erectus kept moving. They could literally run their prey to death, tracking an antelope for hours until the animal collapsed from heat stroke. But it wasn't just their bodies that changed, it was their minds. Their brains were larger, averaging around 900 cubic centimeters. Still smaller than ours, but a massive leap forward. And with that increased brain power came the spark of true technological revolution. They invented the Acheulean hand axe. It looks simple to an untrained eye, a teardrop-shaped piece of stone, but creating it requires a profound cognitive leap. You cannot make a hand axe by randomly smashing rocks together. You have to look at a raw, unshaped stone and see the tool hiding inside it. You have to plan your strikes, understanding the exact angle and force required to flake away the excess material. Homo erectus made these axes by the millions. They used them to butcher meat, smash bones for marrow, dig for tubers, and cut wood. This tool was so perfectly designed for its purpose that the design remained virtually unchanged for over 1 million years. It was a Swiss Army knife of the Pleistocene. Armed with these tools and propelled by those long, striding legs, Homo erectus did something unprecedented. They left the cradle. They walked out of Africa. They crossed the Arabian Peninsula. They pushed into the harsh, seasonal climates of Central Asia. They walked east thousands of miles until they reached the dense, alien jungles of Indonesia. And they walked north into the Caucasus Mountains. They didn't do this because they had a grand plan to conquer the globe. They did it the way all animals expand, following the herds, following the water, moving one valley over when the hunting got bad. But over generations, those valleys added up to continents. And somewhere along that unimaginable journey, they achieved something that changed the trajectory of life on Earth forever. They captured the sun. They tamed fire. We don't know exactly when or where the first spark was coaxed into a flame, but by 1 million years ago, hearts were burning in the night. Try to imagine the sheer terror of living in a world without fire. When the sun went down, you were entirely at the mercy of the dark. Saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, cave bears. The night belonged to monsters. You huddled in silence, waiting for the dawn. Fire changed the rules of the universe. It pushed the monsters back into the shadows. It provided warmth, allowing erectus to push into climates that would otherwise freeze the blood in their veins. But most importantly, fire changed their biology. Cooking meat and tough tubers breaks down the complex proteins and carbohydrates, effectively doing the work of digestion outside the body. It unlocks a massive amount of calories that would otherwise pass through the system unused. Because they no longer needed massive, energy-intensive digestive tracts to process raw food, their guts shrank, and that surplus energy was redirected upward, fueling the growth of an organ that demands an extraordinary amount of calories: the brain. Fire literally fed the evolution of human intelligence. It also changed the fabric of society. The hearth became a focal point. You don't just eat around a fire. You sit, you look at each other, you communicate. Even if Homo erectus did not have complex grammar or recursive language as we know it, they communicated. They coordinated. They became a tribe. For over 1 million years, they were the undisputed masters of the old world. But the Earth is a restless, violent host. Around 120,000 years ago, the climate on the island of Java, the final stronghold of Homo erectus, began to shift radically. The open woodlands and savannas that erectus had thrived in for countless generations began to vanish. The rains increased and dense, impenetrable tropical rainforests swept across the landscape. Erectus was a creature of the open plains, a hunter of the grasslands. Their hunting strategies, their physical build, their entire way of life was tied to that specific environment. When the forest closed in, they could not adapt. Their conservative toolkit, which had served them perfectly for 1,000,000 years, was useless in the dense jungle. They could not transition fast enough. The last of the great wanderers, isolated on an island at the edge of the world, quietly faded into the dark. They left behind only thick-boned skulls and scattered hand axes along the Solo River, silent monuments to a species that saw more of the Earth's history than we can possibly imagine. They were the first, but they were not the last. And long before Erectus vanished from Java, a new lineage had already risen in the West, a lineage that would shatter into the 3 most dominant human species the world had ever seen. If Homo erectus was the wanderer, Homo heidelbergensis was a great pivot point, the grand ancestor, the crucible from which the modern human drama would be forged. Emerging around 700,000 years ago, likely from a late, advanced population of African erectus, heidelbergensis was a creature of immense power and growing intellect. They spread rapidly, pushing into Europe, Western Asia, and across Africa. They were not a single uniform population, but a sprawling, diverse network of regional groups, constantly shifting and adapting. When you look at the skull of Homo heidelbergensis, you see the tension between the ancient past and the modern future. The jaw is massive, heavily built, and entirely lacks a chin, a primitive trait holding on tight. Above the eyes is a thick, uninterrupted shelf of bone, a brow ridge that looks like it was carved from granite. But behind that heavy brow, the brain case is expanding. The back of the skull is beginning to round out. Their brains were pushing 1,200 cubic centimeters, bridging the gap between the older erectus and the massive brains that would eventually belong to the Neanderthals and to us. They were not just physically different. Their minds were working on an entirely new level. Heidelbergensis was the first human species to master a revolutionary way of working stone, the levallois technique. This was not the simple chipping away of a hand axe. This was engineering. To make a levallois tool, a tool maker had to take a core of flint and meticulously shape it, knocking off precise flakes around the edges to create a tortoiseshell shape. They were preparing the core. They had to visualize the final product before a single cutting edge was made. Then, with one final, perfectly angled, perfectly weighted strike to the top of the core, a large, razor-sharp blade would detach. It requires foresight. It requires an understanding of the geometric properties of stone. It requires a mind capable of abstract planning. And they didn't just make better knives. They made the first true weapons. At a site called Schöningen in Germany, archaeologists unearthed a breathtaking discovery perfectly preserved in the anaerobic mud of an ancient coal mine. Wooden spears, dating back 400,000 years. These were not just pointy sticks. They were crafted from a hard, dense wood at the base of spruce trees. They were meticulously balanced, with the center of gravity placed specifically in the front third of the shaft, mimicking the exact aerodynamic design of a modern Olympic javelin. They were built for throwing, and they were built to kill. Alongside these spears were shattered bones of wild horses, bearing the unmistakable cut marks of stone butchery tools. Homo heidelbergensis were not scavengers waiting for lions to finish their meals. They were apex predators. They were hunting some of the fastest, strongest prey on the European continent, and they were doing it with coordinated, strategic ambushes. To hunt large, dangerous game like wild horses requires more than just a good spear. It requires a shared mind. It requires hunters to flank, to drive, to communicate silently and efficiently. It requires society that can divide labor, where some hunt, some gather, and some tend the fires. Did they have language? We cannot know for sure. But the complexity of their tools, the geographic spread of their hunting networks, and the sheer coordination required to bring down a herd of wild horses all scream of a species that was communicating complex, concrete ideas. But the world they inhabited was unstable. The Pleistocene was an era defined by violent climatic swings. Massive glaciers would creep down from the north, locking up the world water, plunging the planet into deep, dry ice ages lasting tens of thousands of years. Then, the ice would retreat, the world would flood with warmth, and forests would explode across the continents. These cycles act as a giant evolutionary pump, isolating populations, forcing them to adapt to radical new conditions, and then throwing them back together. Around 400,000 years ago, this climatic pump began to drive a wedge into the widespread populations of Homo heidelbergensis. Geography became destiny. The populations that had pushed deep into the European peninsula found themselves repeatedly trapped by advancing ice sheets. The Mediterranean Sea blocked their retreat to the south, and the glaciers blocked the north and east. They were locked in the freezer. Over hundreds of millennia, the brutal cold applied a relentless evolutionary pressure. Those who were tall and lanky lost body heat too quickly and died. Those with shorter limbs, wider bodies, and massive nasal cavities survived. Their bones thickened to anchor enormous muscles required for wrestling large prey to ground in ambush hunts. The European branch of heidelbergensis was slowly, painfully being forged into something entirely new. They were becoming the Neanderthals. Meanwhile, the populations of heidelbergensis that remained in the vast, sun-drenched expanse of Africa faced a completely different set of challenges. Africa is a continent of immense ecological diversity. Sweeping savannas, deep rainforests, arid deserts, and rugged highlands. The climate fluctuated wildly here too, but the pressures were different. Here, the challenge was not conserving heat, but dissipating it. The challenge was surviving extreme droughts, navigating shifting landscapes, and outsmarting a terrifying array of predators. The African heidelbergensis populations retained a taller, more gracile build, but the real change was happening inside their skulls. The environment demanded a new level of social fluidity and behavioral flexibility. The skulls of these African populations began to change shape. The heavy brow ridges began to thin. The brain case expanded upward, creating a high, vertical forehead. The face tucked inward beneath the frontal lobes. Slowly, over hundreds of thousands of years, the African descendants of heidelbergensis were rounding out. They were becoming Homo sapiens. And far to the east, across the vast steppes and mountain ranges of Asia, a third branch was quietly diverging. The evidence for this split is ghostly, written almost entirely in DNA rather than fossilized bone. Some populations of heidelbergensis had moved east, pushing into the highlands and the deep valleys of Central Asia. Cut off by distance and mountain ranges from their cousins in Europe and Africa, they embarked on their own unique evolutionary journey. They adapted to thin air, the bitter winters, and the vast, open spaces. These isolated eastern populations were transforming into the Denisovans. Homo heidelbergensis did not go extinct in the traditional sense. They did not die out. They shattered. The single, widespread species broke apart under the grinding wheels of climate and geography, splintering into three distinct, highly specialized lineages. The world was now set for the final act of the human drama. The board was arranged. In the icy north and west, the Neanderthals ruled supreme. In the deep east, the Denisovans held the high ground. And in the heart of Africa, a new kind of human, highly adaptable, incredibly social, and possessing a terrifyingly creative mind, was waking up. 300,000 years ago, the grand game began. The lineages that had been separated for hundreds of thousands of years were about to collide. It was a world where you could walk out of your valley and encounter a group of people who looked like you, but walked differently, hunted differently, and communicated in ways you couldn't comprehend. It was a world of pure, unadulterated human diversity. They were all experiments in survival. They were all successful in their own right. None of them knew that a countdown had begun. None of them knew that the planet was about to undergo a purge, and that out of this tangled, beautiful mess of humanity, only one would walk away. To understand the sheer weight of this impending collision, we must first step into the frostbitten world of the true kings of the Ice Age. For far too long, the Neanderthal has been the victim of a vicious, unearned slander. When the first strange, heavy-browed skull was pulled from a limestone quarry in Germany's Neander Valley in 1856, Victorian scientists looked at its robust ridges and concluded it was the skull of a deformed, dim-witted brute. They could not fathom that this creature was a sibling to humanity. They painted them as hunched, grunting apes, stumbling blindly through the snow, waiting to be swept aside by the superior intellect of modern humans. But the bones tell a radically different story. If you were to stand face-to-face with Neanderthal, your first instinct would not be superiority. It would be profound, instinctual intimidation. They were not hunched. They stood entirely upright, looking you dead in the eye. They were shorter than the average modern human, yes, but their physical power was almost unfathomable. Their bones were extraordinarily thick, scarred with the massive attachment points of muscles that would make a modern Olympic powerlifter look fragile. Their chests were deep and barrel-shaped, housing enormous lungs that pulled in vast quantities of oxygen. Their faces were dominated by a large, sweeping nasal cavity. This was a biological radiator, an evolutionary masterpiece designed to pull in the dry, freezing air of glacial Europe and warm and humidify it before it could strike their lungs and drop their core temperature. They needed every ounce of that physical power because of the way they lived. Homo sapiens, when we eventually arrived on the scene, would hunt with projectile weapons. Light spears thrown from a safe distance, and later, the bow and arrow. Neanderthals did not hunt from a distance. They hunted close up. Their world was populated by the megafauna of the Pleistocene. The woolly mammoth, the woolly rhinoceros, the steppe bison, and the cave bear. To bring down a mammoth with a heavy, thick-shafted thrusting spear is an act of almost unimaginable violence and courage. It required getting within striking distance of an animal the size of a modern garbage truck, an animal that could crush a human skull with a casual swing of its trunk. Because of this brutal, close-quarters combat, Neanderthal skeletons are a roadmap of trauma. When anthropologists examine their fossilized remains, they find a pattern of heel fractures that is unlike anything seen in modern human populations. In fact, the only modern humans who exhibit a similar pattern of broken ribs, shattered arms, and fractured skulls are professional rodeo riders. The Neanderthals lived a life of high-impact collisions. But the most remarkable thing about these shattered bones is not that they broke. It is that they healed. In a brutal, unforgiving wilderness, a shattered femur or a crushed shoulder should be an immediate death sentence. A hunter who cannot walk cannot feed himself. He becomes a liability, a drain on the precious, limited resources of the group. If the Neanderthals were the mindless brutes of Victorian myth, the injured would have been left behind in the snow to freeze, or be torn apart by cave hyenas. But they were not left behind. The bones show clear evidence of extensive, long-term healing. The injured were carried. They were fed. Their wounds were tended to, sheltered near the warmth of the hearth, protected by their family members for months, sometimes years, while their bones knit slowly back together. This requires profound empathy. It requires a social safety net, a deep emotional bond that bound the tribe together against the terrifying dark of the Ice Age. And their minds were not small. In fact, on average, a Neanderthal's brain was larger than yours. It measured roughly 1,500 cubic centimeters, compared to the modern human average of 1,400. Now, brain size is not everything, and the architecture of their minds was subtly different. The back of their brain, the occipital lobe, which is heavily involved in visual processing, was remarkably large. They likely had extraordinary eyesight, evolved to pierce the gloom of the long, dark European winters. Their frontal lobes, the area associated with abstract reasoning and complex social networking, might have been slightly smaller or wired differently than ours. This might mean their social circles were tighter, more intimate, relying less on vast networks of strangers and more on fiercely loyal, extended family groups. But they were undeniably beautifully cognitive. They didn't just survive. They felt, they created, and they mourned. In the Shanidar Cave in the mountains of modern-day Iraq, archaeologists found a Neanderthal skeleton buried in a shallow grave. When they analyzed the soil directly surrounding the bones, they found massive concentrations of pollen from yarrow, cornflower, St. Barnaby's thistle, and grape hyacinth. While some scientists argue the pollen was brought in by burrowing rodents, a profound alternative exists, one that fits perfectly with the empathy shown in their healed bones. The Neanderthals buried their dead, and they laid them to rest on a bed of brightly colored spring flowers. They were the first artists of Europe. Deep inside the caves of Spain, long before a single Homo sapiens ever set foot on the continent, someone walked into the pitch blackness, illuminated only by a flickering torch, and pressed their hand against the cold limestone wall. They blew red ochre pigment over their hand, leaving a perfect negative stencil, a signature in stone, a voice echoing across 64,000 years of silence, saying, *I am here. I exist. Asterisks they created jewelry, carefully notching and stringing the massive, razor-sharp talons of golden eagles to wear around their necks. They possessed the FOXP2 gene, the exact genetic variant required for the fine motor control of the tongue and lips necessary for complex speech. Do they speak? We will never hear their voices. But a species that coordinates the ambush of a woolly rhinoceros, cares for its severely wounded, and paints symbols in the deep earth was almost certainly not doing it in silence. They were deeply, vibrantly human. But while the Neanderthals were holding the icy fortress of Europe, a phantom empire was sprawling across the vastness of Asia. Imagine trying to reconstruct a 500-page novel when you only possess 3 torn sentences. That is the frustrating, exhilarating reality of the Denisovans. In 2008, in a freezing, desolate cavern called Denisova Cave, nestled high in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, Russian archaeologists were sifting through the dirt. They found a tiny fragment of bone. It was so small, no larger than a pea, that it could easily have been mistaken for a pebble. It was a single piece of a pinky finger belonging to a teenage girl who died perhaps 50,000 years ago. They assumed it was a Neanderthal or an early Homo sapiens. But when geneticists managed to extract and sequence the DNA trapped inside that tiny shard of bone, the results sent shockwaves to the scientific world. The DNA did not match us, and it did not match the Neanderthals. It was an entirely new lineage of humanity, a sister species that had diverged from the Neanderthals roughly 400,000 years ago and drifted eastward, vanishing into the sprawling immensity of Asia. From that single pinky bone, a few massive molars, and eventually a shattered jawbone found high on the Tibetan plateau, an entire ghost species was willed back into existence. We don't know what their faces looked like. We don't know how tall they were, how they built their shelters, or what their voices sounded like. The physical evidence could fit inside a teacup. Yet, the genetic evidence tells us they were one of the most successful, adaptable human species to ever exist. Their empire was staggeringly vast. The DNA tells us they survived in the bitter, sub-zero winters of Siberia. But they didn't stop there. They pushed south, scaling the sheer, breathtaking altitudes of the Himalayas. The jawbone found in Tibet was sitting at an elevation of nearly 11,000 feet. At this altitude, the air is dangerously thin. A modern human from a lowland city dropped at that elevation would suffer debilitating altitude sickness, their lungs burning, their hearts straining to pump oxygen-starved blood. But the Denisovans thrived there. Their DNA mutated, forging a gene variant called EPS1, which perfectly regulates the production of hemoglobin, allowing them to breathe easy in the roof of the world. And they kept going. The genetic trail of the Denisovans flows down from the freezing mountains and spills into the sweltering, humid tropical jungles of Southeast Asia, stretching across island archipelagos. How do we know this? Because we find their genetic fingerprints permanently stamped into the bloodlines of modern people living today. The Denisovans were the ultimate adapters. They were a lineage stretched across the most extreme environments on the planet. And the Denisovan genome holds one more stunning, humbling secret. When geneticists looked deep into their code, they found evidence that the Denisovans themselves had interbred with an even older, unknown human species. A super archaic ghost. A lineage that broke off in the human family tree perhaps 1 million years ago. We have no bones, no tools, no names for these super archaics. We only know they existed because a shadow of their DNA is trapped inside the Denisovan genome, which is in turn trapped inside the genomes of people living today. The Earth was not just a world of different species. It was a world of hybrids. But not all human species were sprawling across continents. Some of the most extraordinary chapters in the human story were being written in absolute isolation on tiny islands surrounded by deep, unforgiving oceans. Islands are the Earth's private evolutionary laboratories. When animals get trapped on islands, the normal rules of biology are thrown out the window. Without massive predators to fear, and with severely limited food resources, natural selection begins a relentless process of downsizing. It's called insular dwarfism. Over thousands of generations, massive creatures shrink. On the Indonesian island of Flores, this process created a world that defies belief. Here, elephants evolved to be the size of ponies. Rats evolved to be the size of dogs. And humans? humans evolved to be the size of children. When archaeologists dug into the floor of Leonbua Cave on Flores in 2003, they uncovered a skull that simply did not compute. It was fully adult, complete with worn-down wisdom teeth, yet it was so small it could rest comfortably in the palm of your hand. The entire skeleton stood roughly 3.5 feet tall. They named her Homo floresiensis, and she broke every rule we had ever written about human evolution. For decades, the golden rule of our ancestry was that brain size equaled intelligence, and intelligence equaled survival. The narrative was simple. As our ancestors' brains grew larger, they got smarter, they made better tools, and they conquered the world. The brain of Homo floresiensis was 400 cubic centimeters. That is the size of a grapefruit. It is roughly the same volume as the brain of a modern chimpanzee. According to the old rules, a creature with a brain this small should barely be able to survive, let alone create culture. Yet, lying right next to the bones of the hobbits were stone tools. And not just crude, smash rocks. These were carefully knapped blades, points, and scrapers. They were tools that required intent, planning, and a deep understanding of how stone fractures. The hobbits were using these tools to butcher the pony-sized elephants that roamed their island. There are even signs that they control fire. How could a creature with chimpanzee-sized brain master the elements and fashion deadly weapons? The hobbits force us to realize a deeply uncomfortable truth. We are profoundly biased by our own anatomy. We assume that because our massive brains make us smart, massive brains are the only way to be smart. But efficiency matters just as much as volume. Think of the modern computer. A computer from the 1950s took up an entire room, consumed massive amounts of electricity, and possessed a fraction of the processing power of the smartphone currently sitting in your pocket. As technology advances, it miniaturizes. It becomes denser, more interconnected, more efficient. There is no biological law that says a brain must be the size of a football to understand the geometry of a stone tool. The hobbit's brain was small, yes, but it was a human brain. The neurons may have been packed with breathtaking density. The synaptic pathways wired with ruthless efficiency, optimized by an island environment that could not afford to waste precious calories on a massive, energy-hungry cranium. They didn't need to philosophize about the stars. They needed to coordinate a hunt for a giant rat, butcher a pygmy elephant, and keep the fire burning. For hundreds of thousands of years, they were brilliant in their own specific, miniaturized way. And they were not a fluke. Just slightly north, in the Philippine archipelago, on the island of Luzon, lightning struck twice. In Calao Cave, archaeologists found teeth and toe bones belonging to yet another dwarf human species, Homo luzonensis. Even less is known about them than the hobbits, but what little we have is profoundly strange. Their teeth look remarkably modern, yet their toe bones are deeply curved, identical to the toes of Australopithecus, our ape-like ancestors who lived 3 million years earlier. This curvature is an adaptation for gripping branches. It suggests that Homo luzonensis was a human species that still spent a significant amount of its life high in the canopy of the tropical rainforest, climbing with the agility of an ape, yet possessing the teeth and likely the tool-making capacity of a human. How did they get there? Neither Flores nor Luzon were ever connected to the mainland by land bridges, even when sea levels were at their absolute lowest. To reach these islands required crossing miles of treacherous, open, deep-water ocean trenches with ripping currents. Did a massive tsunami wash a group of Homo erectus out to sea, clinging to a raft of uprooted trees, only to wash them ashore on these remote islands where they slowly shrank over millennia? Or, far more controversially, were these ancient, supposedly primitive humans capable of lashing bamboo together, charting the tides, and deliberately sailing into the unknown? We may never know, but the island dwarfs stand as a testament to the sheer, stubborn tenacity of the human genus. Drop us anywhere, isolate us for eons, shrink our brains, alter our bones, and we will still figure out how to make a blade, light a fire, and survive. But if the islands challenge our understanding of intelligence, the deep, lightless caves of South Africa challenge our understanding of the human soul. In 2013, 2 recreational cavers squeezed into a fissure in the earth near Johannesburg. The descent into the rising star cave system is not for the faint of heart. It requires crawling through pitch-black tunnels barely taller than a shoebox, and culminating in a terrifying, vertical, 18-centimeter-wide crack known as the Dragon's Back. Below this jagged chute lies a hidden, isolated cavern called the naledi chamber. It is utterly cut off from the surface. No sunlight has ever penetrated its gloom. No large predators could ever squeeze through the chute. When the cavers dropped their flashlights onto the floor of this chamber, they didn't see limestone. They saw bones, thousands of them. It was the largest single discovery of hominin fossils ever made on the African continent. The species was named Homo naledi, and like the Hobbits, their anatomy was a dizzying jigsaw puzzle of time. Their feet were indistinguishable from ours, perfectly designed for striding long distances across the surface. Their hands possessed long, incredibly curved fingers for climbing, yet they had the precise, stable thumbs required for fine tool manipulation. But their skulls were small, housing a brain that was barely 500 cubic centimeters, a third the size of yours. Initially, because of their small brains and primitive features, scientists assumed these bones must be incredibly ancient, perhaps 2 or 3 million years old. But when the dating results came back, the scientific community was stunned into silence. Homo naledi wasn't an ancient relic. They lived roughly 250,000 to 300,000 years ago. They were walking the plains of South Africa at the exact same time that the large-brained ancestors of Homo sapiens were waking up just slightly further north. But the anatomy is only a fraction of the mystery. The true enigma of Homo naledi is the cave itself. How did thousands of bones end up in an isolated, pitch-black chamber, completely cut off from the surface? There are no bite marks on the bones to suggest they were dragged there by leopards. The chamber is not located at the bottom of a sinkhole where animals could blindly fall in. The bones were not washed in by a massive underground flood. The sediment tells a story of quiet, undisturbed accumulation. There is only one explanation that fits the physical evidence, and it is an explanation that deeply terrifies the traditional view of human exceptionalism. Homo naledi brought their dead there deliberately. Imagine the scene. A member of the naledi group dies. Instead of abandoning the body to the vultures and hyenas of the open savanna, the survivors pick up the corpse. They navigate a treacherous, twisting maze of subterranean tunnels in total, suffocating darkness. They squeeze themselves in the lifeless body of their companion through the jagged, suffocating gap of the dragon's back, tearing their skin on the rocks. They deposit the body in the chamber, and they make the terrifying journey back to the surface. And they do this over and over and over again for generations. To navigate a deep cave system, you cannot rely on memory in the dark. You need light. Recently, evidence of soot and deliberately lit hearths have been found deep within the rising star system. A species with a brain the size of an orange was not only using fire, but they were using it as a portable tool to push back the subterranean dark. And why? Why go through the immense physical danger, the massive expenditure of calories, to dispose of a rotting corpse? In modern humans, we call this a burial. We do it because we have a concept of the afterlife, or a deep, symbolic grief, or a cultural taboo regarding the dead. We do it because we have massive brains capable of profound abstraction. But Homo naledi had a brain the size of a chimpanzee. Were they merely disposing of decaying matter like waste? If so, why drag it through a hellish obstacle course instead of just tossing it into a ravine? Perhaps the spark of symbolic thought, the profound, unquantifiable feeling of grief, and the desire to protect a companion even after the breath has left their lungs, does not require a massive cerebral cortex. Perhaps the soul is older than the large brain. Homo naledi forces us to look into the abyss of time and realize that the sacred, the ritualistic, the human, might have been burning in the dark hundreds of thousands of years before we ever painted a cave wall. This was the world as it stood, a planet of staggering plurality. In the freezing tundras, the Neanderthals were perfecting the art of the ambush. High in the thin air, the Denisovans watched the mountains. On tiny islands, the Hobbits hunted their miniature elephants. In the lightless deep, Homo naledi carried their dead. And in the heart of Africa, Homo sapiens was stepping onto the stage. The board was set. The environments were violently shifting. The glaciers were preparing to advance and retreat in a brutal, rhythmic dance that would stress the ecosystems of the world to their breaking points. The invisible, silent barrier geography that had allowed all these different human species to evolve in beautiful, isolated harmony was about to shatter. The great wandering was about to begin again. And when these highly specialized, deeply entrenched lineages finally locked eyes across the valleys of Eurasia, the Earth would experience a biological reckoning unlike anything it had ever seen. For 2 million years, the world was big enough for all of us. But as the climate warped and populations expanded, the margins began to overlap. The long, pluralistic childhood of humanity was ending. The age of isolation was over. The era of the Great Collision was at hand. As the Grand Collision approached, the final player in this planetary drama was quietly being forged in the relentless, unforgiving crucible of Africa. To understand why we are the ones sitting here today, looking back at the bones of our lost cousins, we have to understand how close we came in never existing at all. The story of Homo sapiens is not a story of immediate, glorious triumph. It is a story of a species that was almost strangled in its crib. Around 195,000 years ago, the Earth entered marine isotope stage 6. It was a period of catastrophic climate change. The global temperatures plummeted, locking the world's moisture into massive northern glaciers. Africa, the cradle of humanity, dried out. The sprawling, vibrant savannas withered into punishing, lifeless deserts. The vast lakes shrank into hypersaline puddles. The continent became a fractured landscape of isolated, shrinking oases. For the early populations of Homo sapiens, this was an apocalypse. Genetic evidence suggests that during this megadrought, our ancestors experienced a terrifying population bottleneck. We were pushed to the absolute brink of extinction. Our numbers crashed. Some estimates suggest that the entire global population of Homo sapiens dwindled to perhaps a few thousand breeding individuals, clinging to survival along the southern coastlines of Africa and a few inland refuges. We were an endangered species, a flickering candle in a hurricane. But bottlenecks are evolutionary pressure cookers. When a species is pushed to the edge of annihilation, the few who survive do so because they possess a specific, crucial advantage. The Neanderthals survived the brutal cold of Europe by specializing their bodies. Homo erectus survived by perfecting a single, incredibly effective tool. But the ancestors of Homo sapiens, trapped in a rapidly dying landscape, could not rely on biological specialization. The environment was too chaotic. So they specialized in something else entirely. They specialized in adaptability. They realized in some deep, unspoken biological way that they could not survive alone. The traditional hominin social group, a small, extended family holding a specific territory, was a death sentence in a desert. If your local water hole dries up and you have no allies in the next valley, you die. To survive the megadrought, Homo sapiens had to stretch their social webs. They began to forge connections with groups they had never met. We see the first whispers of this in the archaeological record. Deep in the caves of South Africa, at places like Blombo's Cave, we find pieces of red ochre meticulously engraved with intersecting geometric lines. We find tiny sea snail shells pierced through the center and strung together to make necklaces. These are not tools for butchering meat or digging roots. They are tools of the mind. They are symbols. A necklace of shells is a message. It says, asterisk, I belong to this group. I have this status. We share this identity. Asterisk, when you have physical symbols, you can build trust across vast distances. You can trade. We begin to see obsidian and high-quality flint moving hundreds of miles from their source. Homo sapiens was building the first trade routes, the first alliances. When the drought hit one territory, a group could rely on their symbolic ties to seek refuge with neighbors far away. We were building an insurance policy against the hostility of the earth. We were wiring our brains for hyper-cooperation, and our tools began to change. We abandoned the heavy, static hand axes of our ancestors. We began to strike long, incredibly thin, razor-sharp blades of stone. We invented microliths, tiny, precisely shaped stones that could be glued into wooden shafts with heated tree resin to create spears, darts, and eventually the bow and arrow. We were no longer just holding our weapons. We were engineering compound machines. We began to heat-treat stone in the fire to alter its molecular structure, making it flake more predictably. We were not just adapting to the environment. We were actively manipulating the physics of the world around us. When the climate eventually shifted again, and the rains finally returned to Africa, the continent bloomed, and the descendants of those few thousand survivors began to multiply. But they were no longer the same creatures they had been before the drought. They had been reforged. They were equipped with projectile weapons, abstract thought, complex language, and a boundless, insatiable curiosity. They looked at the horizon, and unlike any species before them, they didn't just see a place to hunt. They saw a question. Around 100,000 years ago, the first vanguard of Homo sapiens pushed out Africa, crossing the Sinai Peninsula and entering the Levant, modern-day Israel, and the Middle East. This was the crossroads of the world, the bridge between Africa and Eurasia, and it was here that the first great collision occurred, because the Levant was not empty. It was the southern frontier of the Neanderthal Empire. For decades, we imagined this encounter as a bloodbath, a brutal war of extermination where the advanced, upright Homo sapiens slaughtered the primitive, hulking Neanderthals. It makes for a compelling, cinematic story. But the Earth tells a story that is far more nuanced and far more haunting. When those early Homo sapiens entered the caves of the Levant, places like Skull and Kafza, they lived there for a time. But then the climate shifted again. The glaciers advanced in the north, pushing the cold weather further south. The Homo sapiens populations, not yet adapted to the freezing temperatures, retreated. They vanished from the fossil record of the region. And who moved into those exact same caves? The Neanderthals. They simply followed the cold. For tens of thousands of years, the Levant was a revolving door. When the world warmed, sapiens moved up from Africa. When the world froze, Neanderthals moved down from Europe. They were two perfectly matched apex predators, pushing against an invisible, fluctuating climatic boundary. Homo sapiens did not win the first round. In fact, they lost. They were pushed back into Africa. Their grand expansion stalled for another 40,000 years. But then, roughly 70,000 years ago, something shifted. Perhaps our technology had improved. Perhaps our population numbers had grown too large to be contained. Perhaps a genetic mutation had finalized the wiring of our complex language. Whatever the spark, a new wave of Homo sapiens poured out of Africa. And this time, they did not retreat. They pushed into Levant, and they looked into the eyes of the Neanderthals. What did that encounter look like? Stand in the shoes of a Homo sapiens hunter for a moment. You have walked out of the warm, sun-baked landscapes of your ancestors. You enter a dense, temperate forest. You smell the smoke of a fire that you did not light. You approach carefully, gripping your spear, and through the trees, you see them. They walk on two legs. They wear the skins of animals. They hold spears. They look like you, but their bodies are impossibly thick, their chests massive, their faces dominated by heavy brows and large, striking eyes. You hear them speaking to one another in a rhythm, a cadence that sounds like a language, but you cannot understand a single syllable. They were aliens, yet they were profoundly familiar. They were the ultimate other. But they were also a mirror. And here, in the shadows of those ancient forests, the greatest taboo of our evolutionary history was broken. They did not just fight. They did not just compete for hunting grounds. They approached one another. We know this with absolute, undeniable certainty because the evidence is coursing through your veins right now. When geneticists finally mapped the Neanderthal genome, they compared it to the DNA of modern humans. They found something that forced them to rewrite every textbook on human evolution. Every single human being alive today whose ancestry lies outside of sub-Saharan Africa, every European, every Asian, every Native American, every Polynesian, carries between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. The boundaries between species are not solid walls of brick and mortar. They are permeable membranes. In the cold, unforgiving wilderness of Pleistocene, when a small band of Homo sapiens encountered a small band of Neanderthals, they did not inevitably raise their spears. Sometimes they lowered them. Sometimes, across the vast chasm of evolutionary time, across the barrier of unrecognizable languages and different physical forms, They recognized a shared humanity. They sat around the same fires. They shared food, they mated, and they had children. These hybrid children were the physical embodiment of the collision, half Sapiens, half Neanderthal. And crucially, they were fertile. They grew up, and they had children of their own, weaving the thick, cold-adapted genetic code of the kings of the Ice Age directly into the expanding, restless populations of modern humans. This interbreeding was not a rare, isolated fluke. It happened multiple times, in multiple places. It happened in the Middle East. It happened as sapiens pushed deep into the snowy plains of Europe. It happened in the mountains of Eastern Europe. We have found the jawbone of a modern human in Romania, dating to 40,000 years ago, whose genome contained so much Neanderthal DNA that it had a pure Neanderthal ancestor just 4 to 6 generations back in his family tree. He was a great-great-great-grandson of a Neanderthal, and this genetic inheritance was not a burden. It was a staggering evolutionary gift. The Neanderthals had been living in Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years. They had evolved the perfect immune systems to fight off the local viruses, bacteria, and parasites. When Homo sapiens walked out of Africa, they were entirely defenseless against these alien Eurasian diseases. If we had not interbred with the Neanderthals, our ancestors might have been wiped out by a single virulent plague. But by absorbing Neanderthal DNA, we acquired a massive, instant upgrade to our immune systems. We stole their hard-won biological armor. We absorbed genes that changed how our blood coagulated to heal wounds faster, genes that altered our skin to process sunlight differently in northern latitudes, genes that helped our bodies store fat to survive the freezing winters. We did not conquer the Neanderthals purely through war. We absorbed them. We swallowed them into our rapidly expanding gene pool. But Europe was only one front of the Great Expansion. While some bands of Homo sapiens turned left and marched into the snow, others turned right, following the coastlines, marching eastward into the staggering immensity of Asia. This eastern journey was a masterclass in human adaptability. The groups that moved east had to navigate environments that changed with terrifying speed. They walked through the scorching desert of Arabia, pushing into the dense, suffocating mangrove swamps of the Indian coast. They moved down into the tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia. And in these sprawling, dense jungles, they encountered the phantoms, the Denisovans, just as they had in the West. Homo sapiens did not view these different humans purely as enemies. The encounters in Asia were just as intimate as the encounters in Europe. The genetic evidence tells us that as Homo sapiens swept through Asia, they interbred with Denisovan populations over and over again, and the genetic legacy they inherited was just as profound. When the ancestors of modern Tibetans and Sherpas decided to leave the lowlands and climb into the oxygen-starved heights of the Himalayas, they did not have tens of thousands of years to slowly evolve a tolerance to the altitude. They didn't need to, because they carried the Denisovan EPS1 gene, a genetic key handed down from a ghost species that had already mastered the mountains. This single gene, acquired through interbreeding, allowed our species to conquer the roof of the world. And as the eastern migration reached the very edge of the Asian continent, they encountered the most formidable barrier on Earth, the ocean. Looking out from the islands of Indonesia, there was no land bridge, just deep, violent, churning water separating them from the unknown continent of Sahul, what we now call Australia and New Guinea. Homo erectus had never crossed it. The Neanderthals had never seen an ocean like it. But Homo sapiens did not stop. Somewhere around 65,000 years ago, standing on the beaches of island Southeast Asia, our ancestors did the impossible. They built watercraft. Perhaps they were rafts of bamboo lashed together with vines, or simple dugout canoes. They loaded their families, their tools, and the embers of their fires onto these fragile vessels, and they pushed off into the deep water, sailing out of sight of land, guided only by the stars and the currents. When they landed on the shores of Australia, they became the first humans to ever set foot on that massive continent. And the genetic code of the Aboriginal Australians who descend from those incredible voyagers holds the highest percentage of Denisovan DNA on the planet, up to 6%. The ancestors of indigenous Australians and Papuans had carried the ghosts of the Denisovans with them across the sea. But the story of interbreeding does not stop at the edges of Eurasia. For a long time, Scientists believe that the Homo sapiens populations who remained in Africa, who never joined the Great Migration, represented a pure lineage, untouched by archaic DNA. But the Earth's memory is deeper than we imagined. When geneticists recently developed new, highly sophisticated algorithms to search the genomes of modern West African populations, they found something astonishing. They found chunks of DNA that did not belong to Homo sapiens. But they also didn't belong to Neanderthals or Denisovans. They belonged to a completely unknown, deeply ancient human species, a ghost lineage that lived in Africa, a species we have absolutely zero fossil evidence for. Sometime in the last 50,000 years, while Homo sapiens was painting caves in France and sailing to Australia, other groups of Homo sapiens in Africa were encountering and interbreeding with entirely different human species in the rainforests and savannas of their homeland. What this reveals is a truth that shatters our modern concept of purity and division. There is no such thing as a pure Homo sapiens. We are all mutts. We are an amalgamation, a patchwork quilt sewn together from the biology of multiple human species. Our survival was not a solitary victory. It was a collaborative effort, an evolutionary relay race where other species handed us the genetic batons we needed to cross the finish line. But while the genetic legacy of these other species lived on within us, their physical presence on the Earth was rapidly approaching a terrifying, quiet end. The great collision had occurred. The genes had been exchanged. But the world was fundamentally changing, and the margins of survival were shrinking to a razor's edge. As Homo sapiens populations exploded, fueled by our massive, interlocking trade networks, our adaptable tools, and our newly acquired archaic genes, we became a tidal wave sweeping across the continents. We didn't necessarily set out to exterminate our cousins, but we were hungry. We were incredibly efficient hunters. We reproduced faster than they did, and we could extract calories from environments in ways they simply couldn't. When the climate shifted again, plunging Europe into another brutal cold snap, the Neanderthals found themselves trapped. They had survived ice ages before, but this time, the valleys they retreated to were already occupied by us. We had bows and arrows. We had needles made of bone, allowing us to sew tight, weatherproof clothing that kept us warm without needing massive, energy-draining bodies. We could survive on less food. When the megafauna became scarce, we shifted to eating fish, rabbits, and birds. The Neanderthals, with their massive caloric requirements and their reliance on close-quarters ambush hunting of giant beasts, could not adapt fast enough. They were slowly, inevitably pushed to the absolute fringes of the world. They retreated to the high mountains. They fell back to the jagged, wind-battered caves of Gibraltar at the very edge of the Iberian Peninsula, staring out at the Atlantic Ocean with nowhere left to run. Their populations fragmented. They became isolated groups of 10 or 12 individuals, inbred, starving, their fires burning lower and lower against the encroaching dark. And in Asia, the Denisovans were experiencing the same silent collapse. As Sapiens hunters filled the valleys and the mountains, the phantoms faded further into the shadows. We don't know exactly how they died. There are no battlefields filled with Denisovan bones. They simply vanished from a genetic and fossil record, slipping beneath the waves of an unstoppable demographic tide. Even the isolated island sanctuaries were not safe. When Homo sapiens finally pushed their boats onto the shores of Flores, they entered the fairy tale world of the Hobbits. Did we hunt the miniature elephants to extinction, starving the Hobbits out? Did we bring diseases that ravaged their small, isolated population? Or did we simply outcompete them for the limited resources of the jungle canopy? The archaeological record is silent on the cause, but the timing is damning. Shortly after modern humans arrived in the region, the tools of Homo floresiensis vanished from the layers of dirt. The little people of the islands were swallowed by the silence, and deep in the caves of South Africa, the fires of Homo naledi went out. It wasn't a sudden apocalypse. It was a slow, agonizing attrition playing out over tens of thousands of years. It was a mother failing to find enough food for her child. It was a hunting party that never returned from the cold. It was a small tribe, separated from the rest of their kind, quietly succumbing to disease or to freezing winter. One by one, the other voices in the human chorus began to fall silent. The tangled bush of human evolution was being violently pruned. The branches were snapping, falling to the earth, leaving only a single, unbroken stem reaching upward. By 30,000 years ago, the Great Vanishing was nearly complete. The planet, which for 2 million years had played host to a vibrant, chaotic, diverse family of humanity, was undergoing a profound transformation. The Neanderthals were gone. The Denisovans were gone. Erectus, naledi, floriensis, luzonensis, all gone. The Earth continued its slow rotation. The glaciers advanced and retreated. The wind howled to the empty limestone caves of Europe and across the high plateaus of Tibet. But the fires that burned in the night were now lit by only one kind of hand. For the first time in the entire sweeping history of our lineage, Homo sapiens woke up, looked across the vast expanse of the earth, and realized that we were entirely, utterly alone. The age of multiple humanities had died. The age of solitude had begun. The age of solitude had begun. But what does it actually mean to be the last one left? For over 10,000 years, a mere fraction of a second in the geological sweep of time, we have lived in a world where human means only one thing. We have grown so accustomed to this echoing silence that we mistake it for the natural order of the universe. We look around at our sprawling civilizations, our billions of faces, and we see an overwhelming abundance of life. But from the perspective of evolutionary history, our modern world is a biological ghost town. When the last Neanderthal breathed their final breath in the sea-battered caves of Gibraltar, when the final Denisovan campfires burned out in the frozen valleys of the Altai Mountains, when the little people of Flores faded into the myth and memory of the jungle canopy, the Earth did not just lose a few populations of upright walking apes. It suffered a catastrophic hemorrhage of diversity. Think about what was lost. We lost entirely different ways of experiencing the universe. We lost eyes that were adapted to see the subtle shades of the Ice Age winter. We lost bodies that could endure the crushing pressures of different atmospheres and temperatures without the need for artificial clothing or shelter. We lost cognitive architectures that solve problems in ways our brains are simply not wired to comprehend. The genus Homo, which had once boasted a spectacular spectrum of physical forms, ranging from creatures barely 3 feet tall to robust giants of immense muscular power, with brains ranging from the size of an orange to volumes larger than our own, was suddenly violently reduced to a single, narrow baseline. Today, if you take the DNA of a human from a frozen tundra of the Arctic, a human from the sweltering deserts of sub-Saharan Africa, and a human from the remote islands of the Pacific, their genetic codes are astonishingly, almost unsettlingly identical, compared to almost any other widespread mammal on the planet. Compared to chimpanzees or mice or wolves, Homo sapiens possesses a shockingly low level of genetic diversity. We are a bottleneck species. We are all the descendants of that small, desperate band of survivors who clung to life during the great African megadrought, and who eventually expanded to conquer the globe. We conquered the world, but we did so at the cost of the human rainbow. We are genetically impoverished. We are vulnerable. If a pathogen perfectly designed to target our specific genetic baseline sweeps across the globe, there are no other human lineages waiting in the wings to carry on the torch of fire and stone. We have put all the evolutionary eggs of human consciousness into a single fragile basket. And yet, if you know exactly how to look, if you know how to read the microscopic landscapes of our biology, you'll find that the silence of our solitude is an illusion. We are not alone. The others never truly left. For centuries, extinction was viewed as an absolute finality. A species lived, it struggled, and then it died out, leaving behind nothing but bones slowly turned to stone in the dark layers of the earth. But the story of our extinct cousins forces us to fundamentally rewrite the definition of extinction. Because while the Neanderthals and the Denisovans no longer walked the earth as distinct, independent populations, their biological essence was not extinguished. It was absorbed. It was integrated. It was hijacked. They are living inside you right now. If your ancestry traces back to anywhere outside of sub-Saharan Africa, you are a walking, breathing relic of the Pleistocene. You are a biological mosaic. Hidden within the coiled, microscopic spirals of your DNA are fragments of code that were not forged in the evolutionary fires of Homo sapiens. They are alien sequences inherited directly from the kings of the Ice Age and the phantoms of the Asian steppes. Consider the Neanderthal contribution. That 1 to 4% of Neanderthal DNA carried by modern Europeans and Asians might sound like a tiny, insignificant fraction, a mere drop in the genetic ocean. But DNA is not measured simply by volume. It is measured by function. Those Neanderthal sequences are not dead, inactive junk carried along as evolutionary baggage. They are highly active, deeply influential genes that are constantly operating in the background of your life, pulling the microscopic levers of your biology every single second of every single day. When the first Homo sapiens walked out of the warm, pathogen-free environment of the African continent and stepped into dense, temperate forests of Eurasia, they were walking into a biological minefield. The bacteria, the viruses, the parasites of Europe and Asia were entirely alien to our immune systems. We had absolutely no natural defense. We were sitting ducks for infections that could have wiped out our entire migration in a matter of generations. But the Neanderthals had been living in that exact environment for hundreds of thousands of years. Their bodies had fought those invisible wars. Their immune systems had slowly, brutally adapted to recognize and destroy the specific pathogens of a Eurasian landmass. When our ancestors encountered the Neanderthals beneath the canopy of those ancient forests, and when they mated with them, they did not just create hybrid children, they executed one of the most brilliant evolutionary heists in the history of life on Earth. They stole the Neanderthal immune system. Today, right now, as you listen to this, your body is patrolling your bloodstream for microscopic invaders. The radar system it uses to identify those threats, a complex suite of genes known as the HLA system, contains specific variants that were handed down directly from Neanderthals. One specific variant, known as HLA-02, is found in more than half of all modern people of Eurasian descent. It is a highly aggressive, incredibly effective genetic sequence that helps your white blood cells recognize and destroy invading viruses. You survive the common cold. You fight off bacterial infections, in part because the Neanderthals survived the freezing, pathogen-rich environments of Ice Age Europe and passed that survival manual down to the generations, straight into your cells. But the legacy does not stop at immunity. The Neanderthals shaped the very way we interact with the physical world. As Homo sapiens moved north, into lands where the sun hung low on the horizon, and the winters plunged the world into darkness, our dark, melanin-rich skin, perfectly evolved to block the intense ultraviolet radiation of the African sun, became a liability. In the gloom of the north, we could not absorb enough sunlight to synthesize vitamin D, leading to weak, brittle bones. But the Neanderthals had already solved this problem. They had evolved lighter skin, allowing them to soak up every precious drop of the weak northern sun. They had evolved straight, thick hair to trap heat against the scalp. When you look at modern populations with fair skin, freckles, and certain textures of straight, thick hair, you are looking at the direct physical echoes of Neanderthal introgression, the genes that control the production of keratin, the protein that gives our skin, hair, and nails their toughness, are heavily littered with Neanderthal sequences. They gave us the armor we needed to survive the cold. They even changed the way our bodies process energy. In the brutal, unpredictable environment of the Pleistocene, starvation was a constant, looming specter. The Neanderthals survived by evolving incredibly efficient metabolisms. Their bodies were absolute masters at taking whatever calories they could extract from mammoth meat and wild roots, and violently converting those calories into stored fat. This was a survival mechanism of the highest order. If you could store fat quickly and efficiently, you could survive the lean, freezing months when the snow was too deep to hunt. Through interbreeding, Homo sapiens absorbed these Neanderthal metabolic genes. And for tens of thousands of years, those genes saved our lives. They kept our ancestors from starving to death in the snow. But evolution is a blind process. It does not plan for the future. It optimizes only for the immediate present. Today, those exact same Neanderthal genes, the ones that kept us alive during the Ice Age, are still operating inside our bodies. But the environment has radically changed. We no longer hunt mammoths in the freezing cold. We live in heated environments, surrounded by processed foods, swimming in an ocean of cheap, readily available calories. Our bodies are still desperately trying to store fat for a winter that never comes. Because of this, scientists have linked those ancient Neanderthal metabolic genes to the modern epidemics of obesity and type 2 diabetes. The survival tools of the Pleistocene have become the medical liabilities of the modern era. We are haunted by the success of our ancestors. And the haunting is not just physical, it is neurological. Some of the Neanderthal genetic variants we carry have been linked to our sleep cycles, our circadian rhythms, and even our susceptibility to certain forms of depression. The ghosts in our DNA influence how we feel the cold, how we clot our blood when we're cut, and how we experience the turning of the seasons. But the Neanderthals are only half of the ghost story. Turn your attention back to the east, to the sprawling immensity of Asia and the deep waters of the Pacific. Here, the phantoms of the Denisovans cast an equally profound shadow over the biology of modern humans. While the Neanderthals gave us the tools to survive the cold, the Denisovans gave us the keys to extreme environments. We already know the story of the Tibetan Plateau, how the ancestors of modern Tibetans and Sherpas absorbed the Denisovan EPS1 gene, a biological miracle that alters the way hemoglobin binds to oxygen, allowing them to live, work, and thrive at altitudes that would leave the rest of us gasping for breath. It is perhaps the single most elegant example of adaptive introgression ever discovered. A genetic cheat code, stolen from a ghost, used to conquer the roof of the world. But the Denisovan legacy flows deeper. As Homo sapiens populations moved south, navigating the thousands of islands of Southeast Asia, they encountered the ocean. And here, the Denisovan genes work a different kind of magic. In the Philippines, there's a group of indigenous people known as the Bajo. They are the true masters of the ocean. They live their entire lives on the water, and they are capable of free diving to astonishing depths, sometimes over 200 feet, holding their breath for an impossible amount of time to hunt fish with spears on the ocean floor. When scientists studied the biology of the Bajo, they found something extraordinary. Their spleens, the organ responsible for storing oxygen-rich red blood cells and releasing them into the bloodstream during deep dives, are massive, significantly larger than those of any other human population. And the genetic mutation responsible for this enlarged diving adapted spleen, it traces its roots back to Denisovan introgression. A species that was born in the freezing mountains of Siberia somehow passed down a genetic sequence that eventually allowed a different species of human to conquer the crushing depths of the tropical ocean. And as those early voyagers pushed even further, sailing across the deep water trenches to become the first humans to set foot on the continent of Australia and the island of New Guinea, they carried the Denisovans with them. The indigenous Australians and Papuans of today carry the highest percentage of Denisovan DNA on Earth. These genes are heavily involved in their immune system functions, helping them adapt to the unique, entirely alien flora, fauna, and pathogens of the continent that have been separated from the rest of the world for millions of years. Even in the deep heart of Africa, the continent where we believed Homo sapiens evolved in pure, unbroken isolation, the myth of purity has been shattered. The advanced algorithm scanning the genomes of modern West African populations had detected the unmistakable signatures of ghost introgression. There are segments of DNA floating in the bloodlines of humanity today that do not belong to Neanderthals, Denisovans, or Homo sapiens. They belong to human species that we have absolutely no physical record of. No skulls, no hand axes, no footprints. The only proof that these ancient humans ever lived, loved, and walked the African savannas is the fact that their DNA was woven into ours before they vanished forever. What does all of this mean? It means that our entire conception of what it means to be a species is flawed. For centuries, we relied on a rigid Victorian classification system. A species was a box. You put the Neanderthals in one box, the Denisovans in another, and Homo sapiens in a third. The defining rule of the box was that you could not interbreed with the things in the other boxes. But the Earth does not care about our neat, tidy little boxes. The biology of the Pleistocene was not a series of isolated parallel lines. It was a braided river. The currents separated, flowed apart for hundreds of thousands of years, evolving their own unique characteristics, their own adaptations. But eventually, the river channels merged again. The waters mixed. We are not the pure, unadulterated conquerors of the globe. We are an amalgamation. We are a patchwork quilt of evolutionary survival. We are the sum total of every human experiment that played out over the last million years. We are part Neanderthal, part Denisovan, part African ghost, and part something else entirely. Our biology is a museum of extinct humanities. This realization should entirely reshape how we view our place in the world. It strips away the arrogance of human exceptionalism. We did not survive because we were inherently, biologically superior in every way. We survived because we were the great integrators. We survived because we were capable of looking across the campfire at a creature who looked entirely different from us, who spoke an incomprehensible tongue, whose ancestors had been separated from ours for 500,000 years, and seeing them not just as an enemy, but as a partner. We survived because we took the best parts of them into ourselves. We are the last ones left. The empty room is ours. But when we look in the mirror, if we look closely enough, we are not looking at a single face. We are looking at a crowd. Think back one more time to that moment 300,000 years ago, the peak of human diversity. The crowded cast of characters living their lives under the same stars, feeling the same wind, shivering in the same cold, and laughing around the same fires. The Neanderthals, crouching in the deep limestone caves of Europe, striking flint against iron pyrite to spark a flame that would keep the Ice Age winter at bay. They are long gone. Their caves are empty, their massive spears turned to dust. Homo erectus, walking along the banks of the Solo River in Java, their long legs carrying them across landscapes they had known for 1,000,000 years. The river still flows, but the wanderers are gone, their heavy brows replaced by the silence of the jungle. Homo naledi, moving to the terrifying, suffocating darkness of the rising star cave, carrying the lifeless bodies of their kin to a hidden, sacred chamber. The cave remains deep in the earth, guarding its secrets, but the little climbers with the human hands will never navigate those tight passages again. Homo floresiensis, the Hobbits, hunting in the dense, steaming canopy of their island fortress. The miniature elephants are gone, the giant storks are gone, and the little people are nothing more than a whisper in the local folklore, a memory of a time when the world was magical and strange. The Denisovans, standing on the high, breathless ridges of the Tibetan plateau, looking out over a world of ice and stone. The mountains remain immutable and silent, but the phantoms have faded into the mists. They were not stepping stones on the path to us. They were not rough drafts of humanity waiting to be perfected. They were the masterpieces of their own environments. They were successful, vibrant, and fiercely alive. They were different ways to be human, different answers to the fundamental question of survival. And now, there is only one answer left. The silence of the modern world is profound. There is no one left to encounter on the edge of the forest. There is no one left to trade with who does not share our exact biological baseline. We have mapped the globe, we have charted the deepest oceans, and we have found that the Earth is entirely, exclusively ours. The great experiment of human plurality is over. We stand at the very edge of the evolutionary timeline, looking back across the abyss of 2,000,000 years. We carry the weight of all those lost species inside ourselves. We are the inheritors of the Earth, but we are also the caretakers of their memory. In our immune systems, we carry the Neanderthals' resilience. In our lungs, we carry the Denisovans' breath. In our relentless, restless desire to wander, we carry the legacy of Homo erectus. We are the crowded planet, condensed into a single form. But to truly grasp the weight of this condensed form, we must confront the most deeply ingrained bias of our own species. We must interrogate the very engine of our survival, the human brain. For more than a century, the story of human evolution has been told as a relentless, triumphant march of cranial expansion. We looked at the fossil record and drew a straight, ascending line. We started with the small, ape-like brains of our earliest ancestors, measuring roughly 400 cubic centimeters. And as the millions of years ticked by, we watched that volume swell. Homo habilis at 600, Homo erectus at 900, Homo heidelbergensis at 1200, culminating, finally, in the massive 1,400 cubic centimeter crowning glory of Homo sapiens and the even larger brains of the Neanderthals. The narrative was incredibly simple and incredibly flattering. Bigger brains meant smarter individuals. Smarter individuals solved problems better, hunted better, and survived better. Therefore, natural selection favored the ballooning of the skull. Every textbook diagram reinforced this biological manifest destiny. The implication was clear, absolute, and unquestioned. Intelligence is what made us human, and true intelligence absolutely requires a massive biological hard drive. Then, the earth cracked open and outspilled the bones of the hobbits and the cave dwellers, and that neat, arrogant, ascending line was shattered into 1,000 pieces. The discoveries of Homo floresiensis on its remote Indonesian island, Homo luzonensis in the Philippines, and Homo naledi deep within the subterranean dark of South Africa forced profound and deeply uncomfortable reckoning within the scientific community. Here were 3 distinct species of humans, all surviving deep into the middle or late Pleistocene. They were contemporaries of giant brain titans like Heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and early Homo sapiens. Yet, their brains were tiny. The hobbit's brain was the size of a large orange. Naledi's brain was roughly a third the size of your own. According to the established laws of human evolution, these creatures should have been little more than upright walking apes, operating purely on base instinct, incapable of anything resembling human culture or complex survival strategies. But the Earth does not care about our established laws. Lying right beside the bones of Homo floresiensis were stone tools, and these were not simply rocks smashed together in a blind panic. They were blades, scrapers, and points. Making a stone tool of this caliber is not an instinctual behavior. It is an applied science. It requires a creature to understand the invisible fracture mechanics of volcanic rock. It requires the ability to strike a core with the exact right amount of force, at the exact right angle, to detach a flake that doesn't yet exist. It requires forward planning. It requires visualization. And the hobbits were doing this with a brain the size of a chimpanzee's. Deep in the naledi chamber, Homo naledi was navigating pitch black, suffocatingly tight cave systems, potentially wielding fire, and depositing their dead in a hidden, sacred space. These are behaviors that scream of symbolic thought, of spatial awareness, and of complex social coordination. How is this possible? How can a brain so small generate behaviors so profoundly complex? The answer lies in dismantling our obsession with sheer size and focusing instead on architecture. The small brain paradox is not actually a paradox at all once you realize that intelligence is not simply a matter of volume. It is a matter of density, organization, and wiring. To understand this, we have to look away from humans for a moment and look at the broader animal kingdom. Look at the corvids, the crows and the ravens. A crow possesses a brain that weighs less than 20 grams. It is a fraction of a human brain. Yet, a crow can solve multi-step puzzles. It can fashion a hook out of a straight piece of wire to fish a piece of meat out of a plastic tube. It can recognize individual human faces, remember who treated it poorly, and hold a grudge for years, even passing that grudge down to its offspring. It understands water displacement. It plays. Look at the octopus. Its brain is not even entirely centralized. It is distributed throughout its body, with massive clusters of neurons in its arms. Yet an octopus can navigate complex mazes, escape from sealed, screw-top jars from the inside, and mimic the exact shape, color, and texture of its surroundings in a fraction of a second. What matters is not the absolute size of the organ, but the devastating efficiency of its neural networks. A small brain that is densely packed with neurons, where synaptic connections are wired with absolute ruthless efficiency, can vastly outperform a larger brain that is less organized. In the case of Homo floresiensis and Homo naledi, their small brains were more than sufficient for the cognitive demands of their specific environments. If their brains prioritized the specific circuits needed for their survival, the manual dexterity for napping flint, the spatial memory for navigating a lightless cave, the social coordination for hunting a pygmy elephant, they did not need a massive frontal lobe to ponder abstract philosophy. They needed a hyper-efficient processor tailored exactly to their reality. And there is an even darker, more punishing reality to massive brains that we often ignore. Your brain is a biological tyrant. It is one of the most metabolically expensive organs to ever evolve in the history of the animal kingdom. Even though it accounts for a mere 2% of your total body weight, it consumes a staggering 20% of your daily caloric energy just to keep the lights on. That is a massive evolutionary tax. In a world of infinite abundance, that tax is easy to pay. But the Pleistocene was not a world of abundance. It was a world of starvation, freezing winters, and desperate droughts. For a species living on an isolated island where food resources are strictly limited by the boundaries of the ocean, maintaining a 1,400 cubic centimeter brain is a lethal liability. It requires too much food, too much meat, too much constant foraging. Natural selection on an island is a ruthless accountant. It looks at the energy budget of a species and violently slashes the excess. This is the driving force behind insular dwarfism. The individuals who required slightly less food because their bodies were slightly smaller and their brains slightly less energy hungry were the ones who survived the famines. They lived long enough to reproduce, passing those smaller genes to the next generation. Over hundreds of thousands of years, a population of large-brained Homo erectus arriving on the island of Flores would be systematically, generationally downsized. But evolution is elegant. As it shrank the volume of the brain to save calories, it did not necessarily erase the essential software. It miniaturized it. The essential circuits required for making a fire, for coordinating a hunt, for shaping a stone tool were retained, compressed into a smaller, denser, vastly more energy-efficient package. The Hobbits were not an evolutionary regression. They were an optimization. They were the perfect, sleek, low-energy survival machines of the island canopy. The survival of Homo naledi in southern Africa presents a different variation of the same biological theme. Unlike the Hobbits, naledi was not trapped on an island. They lived on the vast African continent, sharing the landscape with larger-brained hominins like Homo heidelbergensis and early Homo sapiens. How did a small-brained, diminutive species survive for hundreds of thousands of years right under the noses of these larger, increasingly advanced predators? The answer is niche isolation. In the brutal mathematics of ecology, two species cannot occupy the exact same niche in the exact same territory for long. One will always outcompete the other. If Homo naledi had tried to compete directly with early Homo sapiens on the open savanna, hunting the same antelopes with the same strategies, naledi would have been swiftly wiped out. But the fossils tell us naledi wasn't competing on the open plains. Every single bone of Homo naledi we have ever found has been pulled from deep, subterranean cave systems. This suggests they had adapted to a specific, highly specialized ecological niche that the larger-brained humans either avoided or could not exploit. Caves are formidable environments. They are dangerous, easy to get trapped in, and often home to massive, lethal predators. But they also offer unparalleled advantages. They maintain a constant temperature, offering shelter from the blistering heat of the African day and the freezing plunge of the night. They provide an absolute fortress against large plains predators like lions and hyenas, whose bodies are too large to navigate the tight limestone fissures. If Homo naledi was spending a significant portion of his life in and around these complex three-dimensional cave systems, their anatomy suddenly makes perfect sense. Their small stature allowed them to slip through narrow cracks that would trap a Neanderthal or a Homo sapiens. Their intensely curved fingers and primitive, ape-like shoulders, traits long abandoned by the rest of the human family, were perfectly readapted for climbing sheer rock faces and navigating vertical subterranean drops. And their modern, striding feet allowed them to leave the caves during the day, walking long distances across the surface to forage, before retreating to the absolute safety of the dark. They survived not by fighting the giants of Pleistocene, but by stepping entirely out of their way. They found a shadow, a gap in the ecosystem, and they made it their kingdom. This forces us to rethink the very nature of evolutionary success. We view the extinction of species as a failure, and our own survival as the ultimate triumph. But longevity is the truest measure of success. Homo naledi survived for at least 100,000 years, possibly much longer. Homo floresiensis held their island for hundreds of thousands of years. Homo erectus endured for nearly 2 million. They were masters of their respective domains. The fact that they eventually vanished does not invalidate their brilliance. It simply proves that in a world governed by constantly shifting climates and geological upheaval, no strategy lasts forever. A highly specialized species, like a hobbit perfectly adapted to a specific island, or a cave dweller perfectly adapted to a specific subterranean network, is incredibly resilient as long as their environment remains stable. But the moment the environment radically shifts, their specialization becomes a trap. If the forests of Flores burn, or if a new, more adaptable predator arrives on the island, The Hobbit has nowhere to run and no genetic flexibility to rapidly alter its behavior. They were perfectly tuned to a world that suddenly stopped existing. And this brings us to the terrifying, magnificent rise of the ultimate generalist, the species that broke all the rules, the species that didn't just adapt to an environment, but began to adapt the environment to itself. While the specialists were holding their islands and their caves, and while the Neanderthals were locking themselves into the freezing biology of the Ice Age, the ancestors of Homo sapiens were undergoing a quiet, invisible revolution. It wasn't just a revolution of bone and muscle. It was a revolution of the mind, driven by a new, unparalleled form of cognitive flexibility. To understand how Homo sapiens eventually swept the globe and became the last species standing, we have to look at the exact mechanics of our mind. We did not survive because we were immune to the climate shifts that killed the others. We survived because we possess the ultimate biological cheat code, cumulative culture. Other human species had culture. Neanderthals passed down the techniques of making Mysterian stone tools. Erectus passed down the Acheulean hand axe. But their cultures were incredibly conservative. A Homo erectus hand axe from 1 million years ago looks almost exactly like a Homo erectus hand axe from 500,000 years ago. Their innovation was agonizingly slow, tethered closely to biological evolution. Homo sapiens decoupled our survival from our biology. We developed a highly advanced, infinitely recursive form of language. We didn't just communicate immediate threats or the location of food. We could communicate about the past. We could theorize about the future. We could discuss things that did not physically exist, myths, gods, abstract concepts, shared identities. Because of this recursive language, when a brilliant Homo sapiens invented a new way to heat treat stone or a new way to carve a bone fishhook, that knowledge didn't die with them. It was spoken. It was taught. It was passed down to the next generation, who took that knowledge and improved upon it. This is cumulative culture. It is a snowball rolling down a mountain, gathering mass and speed. We didn't need to wait tens of thousands of years for our bodies to evolve a thick coat of fur to survive the cold. We simply used our cumulative knowledge to invent a bone needle, tailor the skins of animals, and wear the fur of another creature. We didn't need to evolve an enormous, heavy jaw to crack frozen meat. We invented a controlled use of specialized fire pits and boiling stones. We became biologically detached from our environments. We were the first species that could walk into an entirely alien landscape, a frozen tundra, a scorching desert, a dense jungle. And instead of waiting for evolution to change our bodies to fit the landscape, we use our minds to change our behavior instantly. This cognitive hyperflexibility is what made us so unspeakably dangerous. When we poured out of Africa and encountered the other human species of the world, we weren't just encountering physical competitors. We were bringing a tidal wave of rapid, unpredictable innovation into ecosystems that have been stable for hundreds of thousands of years. The Neanderthals knew every rock, every valley, and every migration route in Europe. They were the masters of their domain. But when the climate shifted wildly 40,000 years ago, plunging the continent into chaos, their specialized ambush hunting broke down. The deep forest receded, replaced by open, frozen steppes. You cannot ambush a herd of reindeer on a flat, open plain. You need to shoot them from a distance. The Neanderthals struggled to invent the required projectile technology in time. But Homo sapiens arrived already carrying the spear thrower, the atlatl, a simple lever made of bone or wood that acted as an extension of the human arm, allowing a light spear to be thrown with terrifying velocity and accuracy across open ground. We didn't outmuscle the Neanderthals. We out-innovated them. We could extract calories from a freezing landscape with far less risk and far greater efficiency. And because of our massive, interconnected trade networks, built on those shared fictions and symbolic artifacts, we could absorb localized failures. If a Neanderthal group suffered a terrible winter and couldn't find food, they starved alone in their valley. If a Homo sapiens group suffered a terrible winter, they could fall back on their alliances. They could trade shells or high-quality flint for dried meat from a neighboring tribe 50 miles away. We had built an invisible safety net over the landscape. This is the silent, grinding mechanism of the Great Extinction. It rarely looks like a war. It looks like a slow, demographic suffocation. Imagine two populations sharing a vast valley. One is a group of Neanderthals, requiring massive amounts of calories to fuel their heavy bodies, reproducing slowly and relying on close quarters hunting. The other is a group of Homo sapiens, requiring fewer calories, hunting from a safe distance, sharing resources across a massive trade network, and reproducing slightly faster. In year 1, nothing seems to change. In year 10, nothing seems to change. But over 1,000 years, the math becomes inescapable. The sapiens extract just a little more food. Their children survive at a slightly higher rate. Their population slowly swells. The Neanderthals find the game just a little scarcer. Their infant mortality creeps up just a fraction of a percent. Their population slowly shrinks. The sapiens expand their territory to feed their growing numbers, pushing the Neanderthals into the marginal lands, the higher, colder valleys where the hunting is poorer. The stress fractures the Neanderthal social groups. They become isolated. Inbreeding begins to corrupt their genetic health. And then the final blow, as the Neanderthal populations dwindle to tiny, fragmented bands, they encounter the overwhelming numbers of Homo sapiens. And as we have seen in the DNA, they interbred. But when a population of thousands interbreeds with a population of a few dozen, the smaller group doesn't just pass on its genes. It gets completely swallowed. Genetic assimilation is the final, quiet death of a species. The last true Neanderthals didn't die at the end of the spear. They died holding the hands of Homo sapiens, their unique lineage diluted and scattered into the massive, surging ocean of modern human DNA. The same slow, inexorable mathematics played out across the globe. The Denisovans in the vastness of Asia, the Hobbits in the jungles of Flores, the cave dwellers in Africa, they were all subjected to the tidal pull of a species that could adapt faster than the Earth itself could change. The age of plurality was smothered not by malice, but by the relentless, compounding interest of human innovation and demographic expansion. We were a weed in the planetary garden, growing faster, spreading further, and consuming more light than anything else around us. And when the dust finally settled, when the ice retreated and the Holocene epoch dawned, the Earth was entirely, utterly ours. When the dust finally settled, when the glaciers retreated to the poles and the Holocene epoch dawned, the Earth was entirely, utterly ours. But the planet we inherited was suddenly, deafeningly quiet. For the first time in 2 million years, if you stood on the edge of a vast forest or looked across a sweeping, grass-covered steppe, you knew with absolute, terrifying certainty that there was no one looking back at you from the tree line. No other kind of human was lighting a fire in the distance. The parallel experiments of evolution had all been extinguished, leaving Homo sapiens standing alone on a planetary stage that was suddenly bereft of co-stars. We had won the evolutionary lottery, but we were left with a profound, invisible scar, a psychological and ecological void that we immediately began to fill in the only way our restless, overactive brains knew how. To understand what we did next, you have to understand sheer, unprecedented shock of the Holocene. For hundreds of thousands of years, the climate of the Earth had been a violent, swinging pendulum. The Pleistocene was an era of climatic whiplash, plunging from deep, freezing ice ages into brief, sweltering interglacials, tearing ecosystems apart and forcing every living thing to constantly adapt or die. But roughly 11,700 years ago, the pendulum slowed. The climate stabilized. The Earth entered a period of bizarre, unprecedented calm. The seasons became predictable. The sea level settled. And in this new, stable world, the ultimate generalist was unleashed. Without the constant pressure of climatic chaos, without the competition of other human species, Homo sapiens experienced a demographic explosion that would alter the biological fabric of the planet forever. The first victims of our uncontested reign were not other humans, but the giants of the animal kingdom. As our ancestors pushed across the globe, entering the Americas and moving deep into Australia, they encountered megafauna that had never before seen a human. Giant ground sloths the size of modern elephants, saber-toothed cats, massive direwolves, and the colossal mastodons. Because these animals had evolved in isolation from hominins, they possessed no instinctual fear of a small, two-legged ape holding a sharpened stick. They did not recognize us as the apex predator of the planet. By the time they learned to fear us, it was already too late. armed with cumulative culture, coordinate hunting tactics, and the deadly physics of the spear thrower. Homo sapiens swept through these untouched continents like a biological wildfire. Within a few millennia of our arrival in the Americas and Australia, the overwhelming majority of the massive, slow-reproducing megafauna went entirely extinct. We did not simply integrate into these ecosystems. We fundamentally dismantled them. We disrupted food webs that had been stable for millions of years. This was the first true flex of our unbridled capacity to reshape the world. The same relentless efficiency that had slowly starved out the Neanderthals and the Denisovans was now applied to the rest of the natural world. We were no longer just a part of the environment. We were the asteroid. But destroying the old world was only the beginning. With the climate stabilized and the megafauna largely wiped out, we were forced to look at the Earth in a fundamentally new way. For 290,000 years, we have been wanderers. We followed the herds, we followed the seasons, and we relied on the Earth to provide. We were foragers. Then, roughly 10,000 years ago, in a few scattered river valleys across the globe, we did something that no other species, human or otherwise, had ever done. We stopped walking. We looked at the wild grasses growing in the Levant, the wild rice in Asia, the wild maize in the Americas, and we realized that we did not have to wait for the Earth to provide. We could force it to provide. We invented agriculture. From a modern perspective, the agricultural revolution is often painted as the greatest triumph of human ingenuity. It is the foundation of our cities, our empires, and our modern technology. But from a biological perspective, it was a terrifying Faustian bargain. When we shackled ourselves to the wheat and the rice, our bodies paid a horrific price. As foragers, our ancestors ate a wildly diverse diet of dozens of different plants, nuts, berries, and meats. They were tall, robust, and generally healthy, protected from famine by the sheer variety of their food sources. But the first farmers tied their entire existence to a single, fragile crop. If the rains failed or if a blight struck the wheat, the entire village starved. The fossil record of the first agricultural societies is a grim catalog of malnutrition, stunted growth, decayed teeth, and severe bone lesions. We traded individual biological health for massive, overwhelming caloric volume. And as we settled down, packing ourselves into dense, permanent villages surrounded by domesticated animals, we inadvertently created the perfect breeding ground for a new, invisible enemy. For hundreds of thousands of years, human populations have been sparse and highly mobile. If a disease struck a small band of hunter-gatherers, it might kill the group, but it rarely spread because there was simply no one else around to infect. The fire of the disease would quickly burn out for lack of fuel. But in the crowded, unsanitary conditions of the first agricultural cities, living cheek by jowl with pigs, cows, and chickens, pathogens made the leap from animals to humans. Smallpox, tuberculosis, measles, cholera, these were the new monsters of the Holocene. And here, the ghosts of our past rose up to save us one more time. When these devastating plagues swept through the early cities of Eurasia, the descendants of the early farmers did not entirely perish, in large part because their immune systems were armed with the genetic code stolen from the Neanderthals tens of thousands of years earlier. The HLA variants that had protected our ancestors in the Ice Age forests were now working overtime in the crowded, filthy streets of early civilization, fighting off pathogens that threatened to wipe out our grand agriculture experiment. The extinct humans were still fighting our battles, long after their own bones had turned to dust. But the physical transformation of the Earth was matched by an equally profound psychological transformation. Our brains, our hyper-imaginative, pattern-seeking minds, had evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in a world where we were not the only human-like intelligence. For countless generations, the rustle in the bushes or the shadow in the tree line might not be a leopard or a bear. It might be another kind of human, a Denisovan watching from the rocks, a Neanderthal hunting in the same valley. Our brains were hardwired to expect and to recognize other upright walking, tool-using, intelligent beings who looked almost, but not quite, exactly like us. Then, suddenly, they were gone. But the evolutionary wiring in our brains did not simply vanish when the other species went extinct. The hardware remained. We were left with a profound biological expectation of plurality, but a reality of absolute solitude. The human mind abhors a vacuum. It cannot tolerate an empty stage. And so, we did what Homo sapiens does best. We use our capacity for abstract, recursive thought to fill the empty ecological niches with phantoms. Look at the mythology and folklore of almost every human culture on the planet. Our stories are absolutely infested with human-like creatures that live just past the edge of the campfire light. Elves, trolls, dwarves, fairies, goblins, wild men of the woods, spirits of the mountains. We describe them in remarkably consistent ways. They are bipedal. They live in the deep forests or inside mountains. They possess strange, incomprehensible magic or technology. They are fiercely territorial. They sometimes trade with us, sometimes kidnap us, and sometimes mate with us. Are these simply the arbitrary inventions of an overactive imagination? Or are they the incredibly distorted, fading cultural memories of a time when the world was actually shared? Consider the phenomenon known in robotics and psychology as the uncanny valley. When modern humans look at something that is almost, but not perfectly human, like a highly realistic android or a specific type of computer animation, we experience a deep, visceral feeling of revulsion and unease. The hair on our arms stands up, our primal instincts scream that something is wrong. Evolution does not create a biological response without a stimulus. Why would we have a deeply ingrained, instinctual terror of something that looks almost exactly human, but isn't? Perhaps the uncanny valley is an evolutionary hangover, a psychological scar tissue left over from a time when encountering a creature that looked almost human, but not quite, was a matter of life and death, a time when failing to instantly recognize the subtle difference between a member of your own tribe and a heavily muscled, formidable Neanderthal could cost you your life. We may carry the fear of the extinct humans hard-coded into our amygdala, and in some corners of the world, the memories seem almost too specific to be mere myth. Returning to the island of Flores, long after Homo floresiensis vanished from a fossil record, the modern human inhabitants of the island told stories of the Abu-Gogo. The translation of the name means a grandmother who eats everything. The villagers described them with astonishing anatomical precision. They were barely a meter tall. They were covered in hair. They walked upright but with a strange, awkward gait. They lived in limestone caves. They murmured in a language that sounded like a chorus of insects. They would occasionally steal crops or tools, and they could mimic human words like a parrot, but without understanding the meaning. When anthropologists first heard these stories in the 19th and 20th centuries, they dismissed them as standard folklore, just another variation of the leprechaun or the goblin. But then, in 2003, archaeologists dug into Liangbua Cave and pulled out the physical bones of a 3-foot-tall human that perfectly matched the physical description of the Abu-Gogo. Suddenly, the folklore became a haunting possibility. Did Homo floresiensis survive deep into the Holocene? Did they share the island with modern humans for thousands of years? Did the stories of the Abu-Gogo survive across hundreds of generations of oral tradition, preserving the exact physical description of a species that science didn't discover until the 21st century? Similar stories exist all over the world. The Almas in the mountains of Mongolia, described as robust, heavy-browed wild men, the Yeti in the Himalayas, stalking the exact same high-altitude passes where the Denisovans once thrived, the orang pendek in the jungles of Sumatra. We will likely never find living proof of these creatures. They are almost certainly gone. But the persistence of these stories speaks to the profound, aching loneliness of Homo sapiens. We miss the others. We search the shadows for them. We write stories about them. We project them into the stars, scanning the vast, empty radio frequencies of the cosmos, desperately hoping to hear a signal, terrified that we might truly be the only intelligence in the universe. We are looking for the cosmic equivalent of a Neanderthal campfire, because the silence of being alone is too heavy to bear. But while our imaginations populated the dark with ghosts, our cumulative culture went into a terrifying overdrive in the waking world. With the anchor of agriculture holding us in place, the snowball of human innovation turned into an avalanche. In a hunter-gatherer society, a human being can only own what they can carry. Inequality is naturally limited, but in a settled agricultural city, a human can stockpile surplus. They can hoard grain. They can build walls to protect that grain. The concept of massive wealth, of kings and emperors, of standing armies, was born. The social networks that had saved our ancestors during the African mega-drought morphed from loose alliances of equal tribes into massive, rigid hierarchies. The human mind, which evolved to intuitively track the social dynamics of perhaps 150 individuals, was suddenly forced to exist in cities of tens of thousands and eventually empires of millions. To manage this impossible complexity, we invented the final, ultimate tool of cognitive decoupling. We invented writing. Before writing, the survival of a culture depended entirely on the fragile, mortal biology of the human brain. If the elders of a tribe died in a harsh winter before they could pass on the oral traditions, the knowledge of how to navigate by the stars, or how to identify medicinal plants, was deleted from the universe forever. Knowledge was tethered to flesh. Writing shattered that limitation. By pressing a reed stylus into wet clay in Mesopotamia, or carving symbols into turtle shells in China, Homo sapiens figured out how to externalize memory. We transferred our thoughts into physical objects that could outlast the biological lifespan of the thinker. A piece of clay does not die of old age. A scroll does not forget. This was an evolutionary leap as profound as the taming of fire. With writing, knowledge became cumulative on a planetary scale. A mathematician in ancient Greece could write down a geometric proof, and 2,000 years later, a scientist in Europe could read that exact proof and use it to calculate the orbit of a planet. We were no longer bound by space or time. We had created a collective, externalized brain that could hold an infinite amount of data. Powered by this external memory, the pace of change became blinding. It took Homo erectus over 1 million years to slightly refine the shape of a hand axe. It took Homo sapiens just a few thousand years to go from scratching symbols in clay to splitting the atom. We learned to extract the ancient compressed sunlight buried deep within the earth in the form of coal and oil, and we burned it to power machines of unimaginable strength. We bound the continents together with cables of copper and glass, allowing a thought spoken in one hemisphere to be heard in the other before a single second had passed. We synthesized fertilizers from the air, breaking the natural limits of the soil and artificially sustaining billions of lives. We eradicated diseases that had stalked our species since the dawn of the Holocene. We looked at the moon, a cold, dead rock suspended in the infinite void, and we used our collective knowledge to build a metal spear, pack it with controlled explosions, and hurl ourselves across the vacuum of space to walk upon its surface. From a perspective of evolutionary biology, this is an utterly anomalous event. No species in the history of the Earth has ever hijacked its own evolutionary trajectory with such violent speed. We broke the chains of natural selection. If an environment is too cold, we do not wait to evolve thicker skin. We build a heating system. If an environment is too dry, we divert rivers. If our eyesight fails, we grind glass into lenses. We have insulated ourselves in a technological cocoon, rewriting the rules of biology to suit our whims. But this breathtaking ascent has a dark, terrifying mirror image. The very same cognitive tools that allowed us to conquer the world, our capacity for abstract thought, our ability to coordinate in massive numbers, our relentless drive to innovate, are the same tools that now threaten to destroy it. The cumulative culture that gave us modern medicine also gave us a thermonuclear weapon. The externalized memory that allowed us to map the stars also allowed us to engineer the mass, mechanized slaughter of our own kind. The agricultural and industrial revolutions that feed billions are currently altering the chemical composition of the Earth's atmosphere, pulling the trigger on a mass extinction event that mirrors the very climatic chaos that nearly wiped out our ancestors 200,000 years ago. We have become the absolute masters of the Earth, but we are ruling over a kingdom that is rapidly destabilizing under the immense weight of our success. We are no longer competing with Neanderthals or Denisovans. We are competing with ourselves. We are racing against the consequences of our own brilliance. We stand at the absolute pinnacle of our power, looking down at a world we have completely subjugated, and yet the foundations are trembling. The question that hangs in the air is no longer how we survive the Pleistocene. The question is whether the ultimate generalist, the last human species, has built a trap from which not even our infinite adaptability can escape. To understand the sheer magnitude of this trap, we must look at the Earth not through the eyes of a historian, but through the cold, objective, and unforgiving lens of a geologist. When a geologist looks deep into the crust of the Earth, they do not see kings or empires, or the daily struggles of individual lives. They see epics. They see massive, planetary shifts compressed into millimeters of rock. If you look at the geological strata, representing the time of Homo erectus, you see a quiet, slow accumulation of sediment. Perhaps, if you are incredibly lucky, you might find a faint scatter of chipped flint or the carbonized ghost of an ancient campfire. The footprint of erectus, despite their 2-million-year reign, was incredibly light. They live within the boundaries of the Earth's biological systems. The Neanderthals, too, left a gentle scar. A few butchered mammoth bones, a scattering of ash, a faint stencil of red ochre in a lightless cave. But if a geologist 1,000,000 years from now were to examine the rock layers being laid down at this exact moment in time, they would not find a gentle footprint. They would find a violently abrupt, terrifyingly distinct line separating the past from the present. We have entered the Anthropocene. We are no longer just another species moving across the landscape. We have become a sheer geological force, operating on a scale that rivals tectonic shifts and asteroid impacts. That future geologist will find a layer of rock utterly saturated with artificial materials that the Earth had never seen before we invented them. They will find a global dusting of radioactive isotopes, the permanent signature of our atomic testing. They will find billions of tons of synthetic plastics compressed into a thin, indestructible ribbon wrapping the entire globe. They will find the fossilized remnants of our concrete megacities, vast networks of subterranean steel pipes, and the unnerving, ubiquitous fossil record of the domestic chicken, a bird we genetically engineered and bred by the tens of billions to fuel our massive populations. We have altered the chemical composition of the oceans, making them more acidic. We have moved more earth and rock with our machines than all the rivers of the world combined. We have captured the nitrogen from the air to fertilize our crops, altering the fundamental nutrient cycles of the planet. This is the ultimate, extreme expression of cognitive decoupling. We have completely severed our reliance on natural evolutionary adaptation, replacing it with overwhelming, brute force technological domination. But in our hubris, we have misunderstood the nature of specialization. We look at the Hobbits of Flores or the cave-dwelling Homo naledi, and we recognize them as highly specialized species. They were perfectly tuned to a specific, narrow environment, and when that environment vanished, they vanished with it. We, on the other hand, consider ourselves the ultimate generalists. We believe that because we live in the Arctic, the desert, the jungle, and even in the sterile vacuum of low Earth orbit, we are immune to the trap of specialization. But this is a lethal illusion. We are not generalists anymore. We have become the most highly specialized species in the history of the planet. We are not specialized to a specific climate or a specific geographical location. We are biologically specialized to our own technology. Consider the modern human being. For all our massive cognitive power, for all our accumulated knowledge, strip away the technological grid, and we are the most helpless hominins to ever walk the earth. If you took a Homo erectus from 1,000,000 years ago and dropped them into an unfamiliar wilderness, they would survive. They knew how to read the landscape, how to find water, how to strike a spark from raw stone, how to fashion a weapon from a branch. They were deeply, physically integrated with the reality of survival. If you take a modern human, uncouple them from the global supply chain, and place them in that same wilderness, they will almost certainly die. We have outsourced our basic biological survival to a hyper-complex, globally interdependent grid. We have outsourced our memory to massive, humming server farms. We have outsourced our navigation to a constellation of satellites silently orbiting above our heads. We have outsourced our warmth to electrical grids powered by ancient burning fossils. We have outsourced our digestion to industrial agriculture and global shipping networks. Our brains, massive and capable of calculating the physics of black holes, no longer know how to identify a toxic plant from a safe one. We no longer know how to track an animal. We no longer know how to build a shelter that can withstand a freezing winter. We have traded individual competence for collective power. We are exactly like the little people of Flores. The Hobbits were perfectly adapted to an island with no large predators. We are perfectly adapted to a technological island of our own making. And just like the physical island of Flores, Our technological island is incredibly fragile. What happens if the grid fails? What happens if a massive solar flare, like the Carrington event of the 19th century, strikes the Earth today, instantly frying the delicate electronics that manage our power grids, our water pumps, and our global communications? What happens if the climate shifts so violently that our fragile, monoculture agricultural systems collapse? If the artificial environment we have specialized ourselves to suddenly vanishes, we will find ourselves trapped. Our massive brains cannot be eaten for calories. Our smartphones cannot be napped into hand axes. In the event of a total systemic collapse, the ghosts of our ancestors would look upon us not with awe, but with pity. We have built an incredibly tall, magnificent tower, but we have removed the foundational stones to build the higher floors. This extreme vulnerability forces us to reckon with the philosophical burden of our existence. Because if we fail, the loss is not just our own. Remember the genetic mosaic that beats inside your cells. Remember the fragments of the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and the unknown phantoms of Africa that you carry with you. We are not just a single species trying to survive. We are an ark. When the other human species went extinct, they did not die completely. They passed their legacy, their biological hard work, their genetic memories, into us. We are the vault where the entire 2 million year history of the human genus is stored. Every triumph over the ice, every adaptation to the thin mountain air, every desperate survival through a megadrought, it is all preserved in diluted but active form within the living population of Homo sapiens. If we drive ourselves to extinction through our own technological hubris, or through our inability to manage the climate we have destabilized, we do not just end our own story, we end theirs, too. If we die, the Neanderthals die a second, absolute, and final death. The Denisovans vanish forever. The long, beautiful, chaotic experiment of human plurality ends in a sterile, silent void. We are carrying the ghosts of our family, and if we sink, we drag them down into the dark with us. This is the crushing, magnificent weight of being the last ones left. For the vast majority of Earth's history, life has been an unconscious, blind struggle. The dinosaurs ruled the planet for over 150 million years. They were magnificent, terrifying, and biologically brilliant. But in all those millions of years, a Tyrannosaurus rex never looked up at the night sky and wondered what the stars were. A Triceratops never pondered its own mortality or considered the fossilized bones of the creatures that came before it. They lived, they reproduced, and they died in a state of continuous, unreflective present. Consciousness, true, recursive, self-aware consciousness, is an anomaly. It is a biological freak occurrence. The universe is unimaginably vast. It is filled with billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars. It is a sprawling, violent arena of crushing gravity, blinding radiation, and absolute, freezing nothingness. As far as we can currently prove, the universe is dead. It is silent, except for here. Except for this one, tiny, fragile blue suspended in the dark. Here, the universe woke up. Through a long, agonizingly slow process of evolutionary trial and error, the atoms of the universe arrange themselves into a configuration capable of looking back at itself. We are the universe experiencing itself. We are the cosmos made conscious. When you look through a telescope at the swirling dust of a distant nebula, it is not just a human looking at space. It is a universe looking at its own reflection. When we study the quantum mechanics of a subatomic particle, it is the universe trying to understand its own fundamental rules. This capacity for wonder, for profound, abstract thought, was not gifted to us from the sky. It was earned in the dirt, the blood, and the freezing cold of the Pleistocene. It was forged in the minds of Homo erectus as they carried fire through the dark. It was sharpened by the Neanderthals as they buried their dead with flowers. It was refined by the early Homo sapiens as they painted the walls of caves in the flickering light of animal fat lamps. To throw that away, to allow the only known light of consciousness in the universe to extinguish itself because we could not learn to manage the very technology that our intelligence created, would be a tragedy of cosmic proportions. We are standing on the precipice of a new geological era, holding the power of God in hands that evolved to throw stones. We have the capacity to engineer our own destruction or to engineer our salvation. We could choose to transition our energy systems, to pull the carbon back out of the atmosphere, to stabilize the biosphere, and to step carefully into a managed, sustainable future. We could choose to use our cumulative culture not just to conquer the Earth, but to heal it. We could even look beyond the Earth. The same restlessness that drove Homo erectus out of Africa, the same audacious courage that drove our ancestors onto bamboo rafts to sail across the terrifying, unseen depths of the Pacific Ocean, is still burning in our DNA. We are already looking at the red deserts of Mars, calculating the trajectories, dreaming of the day when a human foot will leave a print in the dust of another world. If we can survive our technological adolescence, we have potential to become an interplanetary species, carrying the fire of consciousness and the genetic ghosts of the Neanderthals and the Denisovans out into the wider galaxy. But that future is not guaranteed. Evolution offers no promises. The fossil record is an absolute graveyard of species that were highly successful right up until the moment they weren't. There is a concept in astrophysics known as the Great Filter. It is an attempt to answer the Fermi paradox, the terrifying question of why, in a universe so vast and so old, we have never heard a single signal from an alien civilization. The Great Filter theory suggests that in the evolutionary timeline of any intelligent species, there is a barrier, a filter, a challenge so immensely difficult that almost no species can survive it. Perhaps the Great Filter is the leap from single-celled life to complex life. If so, we have already passed it, and the universe is simply empty of other complex animals. But what if the Great Filter is ahead of us? What if the filter is the exact moment when a species becomes intelligent enough to unlock the massive, world-altering power of nuclear physics, artificial intelligence, and global atmospheric alteration, but lacks the profound moral and social maturity to manage that power? If the Great Filter lies in our immediate future, we are currently accelerating toward it at breakneck speed. Every passing year, our technology becomes more powerful, more complex, and more capable of inflicting catastrophic, planetary-scale damage. We are running a race between our capacity for brilliant, world-saving innovation and our ancient, tribal instincts for conflict and short-term consumption. The Neanderthals did not face a Great Filter. They faced a shifting climate and a new competitor. They fought bravely, but they were bound by the physical limits of their biology and their conservative culture. We are different. If we face a Great Filter, it is a filter entirely of our own design. We are the architects of our own potential doom. But because we are the architects, we also have the power to dismantle the trap. We must learn to look at ourselves not as the masters of the earth, disconnected from the web of life, but as a heavily integrated, highly vulnerable part of it. We must remember that beneath our tailored clothes, beneath our glowing screens and our towering skyscrapers, we are still the children of the Pleistocene. We are still primates who require clean air, fresh water, and a stable climate to survive. We must use the massive, beautiful processing power of our frontal lobes to override the short-term, selfish instincts of our primal brains. We must become the species that the universe needs us to be. Look back at the long, tangled path that led us here. Think of the unimaginable odds, the countless near misses, the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, clearing the stage for the tiny, shivering mammals that would eventually become primates, the drying of the African forest that forced those primates down from the trees and out onto the dangerous, open savanna, the brutal ice ages that tested the resilience of our ancestors, forging their bodies and minds in the fires of extreme adversity, the catastrophic droughts that reduced our numbers to a vanishingly small fraction, forcing us to cooperate or die. Think of the hundreds of billions of human lives that have been lived and lost, the hunters who tracked game across the snow, the mothers who held their children through the freezing nights, the early farmers who broke their backs pulling weeds from the dirt, the forgotten geniuses who invented the wheel, who baked the first bread, who looked at the stars and realized they were not just pinpricks in a canopy, but distant suns. They all survived just long enough to pass the baton. They endured unimaginable suffering, disease, starvation, and fear, all so that the unbroken chain of human DNA could reach this exact moment in time. You are the apex of that monumental effort. You are the living, breathing result of 2 million years of relentless, uncompromising survival. To squander that legacy now, to burn down the house we built just as we are beginning to understand the universe, will be the ultimate betrayal of the ancestors whose blood runs in our veins. We are the last branch of the human family tree, the lonely survivors in the empty room. But we do not have to be the final chapter. The story of humanity is still being written. And for the first time in the history of the Earth, the species writing the story has the power to choose the ending. We can choose to succumb to the trap of our own making, letting the Anthropocene be a brief, disastrous layer of plastic and radioactive ash in the geological record, a silent monument to a species that was too smart for its own good. Or we can choose to be the generalists we once were. We can adapt. We can use the very same cumulative culture, the very same externalized memory, and the very same hypercooperation that allowed us to survive the mega droughts of Africa, to survive the crises of the modern age. We can build a world that honors the staggering diversity of the past by protecting the fragile stability of the future. The silence of the other human species is not just a tragic loss. It is a warning. The Earth has no loyalty to any specific form of life. It does not care if we have large brains, or if we have built cities, or if we have walked on the moon. If we fail to adapt to the reality of the world we have created, the Earth will simply turn the page, and the human experiment will end. But as long as we are here, as long as the fires of consciousness are still burning, the possibilities are infinite. We carry the ghosts, we carry the past, but we are the masters of the future. The board is ours to play. The outcome will be determined not by our biology, but by our choices. Imagine for a moment that we do not fail. Imagine that we navigate the treacherous, terrifying bottleneck of our own technological adolescence. We transition our energy grids, we heal the fractured, bleeding ecosystems of the planet, and we stabilize the biosphere. We pull ourselves back from the brink of the great filter. If we can achieve this, if we can harness the terrifying power of our cumulative culture to preserve rather than destroy, then the story of human evolution does not end in a lonely, silent room. It merely begins a new, incomprehensibly vast chapter. And the great irony of our deep future is that the very human plurality we mourn today, the lost diversity of the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and the Hobbits, might not be lost forever. It might simply be waiting for us in the stars. The Earth is a magnificent cradle, but it is finite. As our understanding of physics, biology, and engineering expands, the restless, wandering spirit of Homo erectus will inevitably pull our eyes upward. The night sky is no longer just a canopy of myths. It is an ocean of destinations. And just as our ancestors stood on the beaches of Indonesia 65,000 years ago, staring across the deep water toward the unknown continent of Australia, we are now standing on the shores of Earth, staring out across the vacuum of space toward the red deserts of Mars, the frozen oceans of Europa, and the exoplanets orbiting distant alien suns. When we finally build the ships to cross that dark ocean, we will be triggering the greatest evolutionary divergence in the history of life. Consider a human colony established on Mars. For the first few generations, they will be entirely reliant on Earth, living in artificial, pressurized domes, shielded from the lethal radiation of the sun. But as the centuries turn into millennia, biology will do what it always does. It will adapt. Mars has roughly one-third the gravity of Earth. Over thousands of generations, the human skeleton, no longer needing to constantly fight the crushing weight of Earth's gravity, will begin to elongate. Bones will become lighter, less dense. The muscular architecture of the body will shift. If they begin to terraform the planet, attempting to build an atmosphere, the air will be thin, much like the peaks of the Himalayas. The descendants of the Martian colonists will inevitably lean on the genetic ghosts within their DNA. The Denisovan EPS1 gene, which allowed ancient humans to conquer the Tibetan Plateau, might be artificially selected for or naturally favored, becoming a universal trait among the Martians. Their lungs might increase in capacity, their chests widening. As they adapt to the lower light levels of a planet further from the sun, their eyes might grow larger, their optic nerves rewiring to process the dim, red-tinted twilight. Over a span of perhaps 100,000 years, a mere fraction of the time Homo erectus walked the Earth, the humans of Mars will become physically, biologically distinct from the humans of Earth. If we push further, building generation ships that travel for thousands of years between star systems, the evolutionary pressures will be even more bizarre. Populations living in zero gravity, exposed to cosmic radiation, and completely genetically isolated from the rest of humanity, will drift. Their bodies, their immune systems, and their cognitive structures will warp and change to fit the environment of a closed-loop starship. Give this process 1,000,000 years. Give it 10 million, as humanity spreads across the galaxy, settling on planets with different gravities, different atmospheric compositions, and different radiation profiles. The single, unbroken stem of Homo sapiens will shatter. The evolutionary bush will branch again, wider and vastly more complex than it ever was on Earth. There will be humans who are tall and gracile, perfectly adapted to low-gravity moons. There will be stout, heavily muscled humans adapted to the crushing gravity of super-Earths, echoing the robust power of the Neanderthals. There will be humans genetically engineered to survive in the vacuum of space, their biology augmented by the very technology that once threatened to destroy us. When the descendants of these far-flung colonies eventually meet again, crossing paths in the vast interstellar voids, they will look at one another and see aliens. They will speak incomprehensible languages. They will possess technologies and cultures perfectly tailored to worlds light years apart. The age of solitude will be permanently shattered. The crowded cast of characters will return to the stage, playing out the drama of evolution on a cosmic scale. And in the DNA of every single one of those radically different interstellar human species, the ghosts of the Pleistocene will still be quietly riding along. The Neanderthal immune genes, the Denisovan altitude adaptations, the ancient, restless curiosity of Homo sapiens. The entire 2,000,000-year struggle in the dirt and the ice of Earth will be the foundational bedrock of a galactic civilization. But even if we never leave the solar system, even if we remain tethered to the Earth until the very end of our days, our legacy has already escaped the boundaries of this planet. In 1977, we launched 2 robotic probes, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. Their mission was to study the outer planets of our solar system, to photograph Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. They did this flawlessly, but their true destiny was always much larger. They were moving so fast that the gravity of the sun could not hold them. They became the first human-made objects to cross the heliopause, the magnetic boundary of our solar system, and enter the cold, infinite void of interstellar space. Bolted to the side of each of these probes is a golden record. It is a time capsule, a message in a bottle cast into the cosmic ocean. On it, we encoded the sound of our world, the wind, the rain, the crash of surf, the calls of humpback whales, and the songs of birds. We encoded the music of Bach, Beethoven, Chuck Berry, and the haunting, ancient melodies of traditional cultures from across the globe. We encoded greetings in 55 different languages, and we encoded the sound of a human heartbeat. Think about the profound biological reality of that heartbeat. The rhythm recorded on that golden disc was generated by a heart that evolved over billions of years. It was a heart sculpted by the oxygen-rich atmosphere of the Carboniferous period, refined by the early mammals hiding from the dinosaurs, and perfected by the upright walking apes of the African savanna. The humans who built the Voyager probes, who calculated their trajectories and engineered their atomic batteries, were entirely unaware of the Denisovans. They did not yet know that Neanderthal DNA was flowing through their own veins. But by sending a piece of humanity into the stars, they inadvertently sent the ghosts too. The golden record is a monument not just to Homo sapiens, but to the entire genus Homo. It is a culmination of every fire ever lit, every stone ever chipped, and every evolutionary hurdle ever overcome by every human species that ever lived. Long after the Earth is gone, long after the sun exhausts its nuclear fuel and expands into a red giant, swallowing the inner planets and boiling the oceans away, long after every fossil, every cave painting, and every monument we have ever built is reduced to plasma and cosmic dust, those 2 small, golden records will still be flying to the absolute zero of the Milky Way. They will outlast the Earth. They will outlast the sun. They are the permanent, indestructible proof that for a brief, glorious moment in the history of the universe, a crowded family of intelligent apes lived on a blue planet, looked up at the stars, and dared to whisper their names into the dark. This is the ultimate perspective of deep time. It renders our daily anxieties, our geopolitical conflicts, and our superficial divisions utterly meaningless. When you look at humanity through the lens of millions of years, the borders we draw on maps dissolve. The differences in our skin color, which are nothing more than recent, superficial adaptations to different levels of ultraviolet light, become trivial. We are not divided by race or nationality. We are a single, highly interconnected biological family. We are the survivors of a brutal, unforgiving gauntlet. To feel this reality, you do not need to look at a fossil in a museum. You do not need to read a complex genetic sequencing report. You only need to look at yourself. Close your eyes. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel the air pulling into your lungs, expanding your chest. That specific anatomical motion, the exact way your diaphragm drops and your ribs flare, is an engineering miracle perfected by Homo erectus as they ran down prey under the blistering African sun. Every time you run, every time you sweat to cool your body, you are invoking the ghost of the great wanderer. Now, think about a time you were sick, a time when a fever burned through your body, making your joints ache and your skin hot to the touch. That fever was not a malfunction. It was a targeted, brilliant defense mechanism. It was your immune system raising the internal temperature of your body to cook the invading viruses alive. The exact molecular sentinels that recognized that virus, the white blood cells that coordinated the attack, were armed and trained by the genetic codes handed down from the Neanderthals. Every time you recover from a cold, a Neanderthal is quietly saving your life. Think about a time you climbed a high mountain or flew in a pressurized airplane, or even just held your breath underwater. The way your red blood cells bind to oxygen, the way your spleen manages your oxygen reserves. These are faint, persistent echoes of the Denisovans, standing on the frozen roof of the world, watching the glaciers move across Asia. And think about the very act of listening to this story. You're taking abstract pulses of sound, translating them into complex emotional and historical concepts within your mind, and generating a feeling of empathy for creatures who have been dead for 40,000 years. This breathtaking capacity for recursive language, for imagination, for profound empathy across time and space is the ultimate gift of the early Homo sapiens. It is the cognitive flexibility that allowed us to survive the megadroughts and build the modern world. You are not a single individual. You are a walking, breathing cemetery. You are a library of extinct lives. You are the absolute sum of the Earth's most complex biological experiment. The universe is characterized by chaos and entropy. Things fall apart. Stars burn out. Galaxies drift away from one another until the night sky is utterly dark. In the face of this overwhelming cosmic decay, life is the ultimate act of rebellion. It is a universe attempting to organize itself, to hold its shape, to remember. And you are the sharpest edge of that rebellion. The story of the 9 human species is a tragedy. Yes, it is a story of profound loss of diverse, beautiful ways of life that were snuffed out by the shifting climate and the relentless expansion of our ancestors. But it is also a story of unspeakable triumph, because their extinction was not absolute. They managed to slip the ultimate trap of death by weaving themselves into us. When you walk outside tonight, look up at the stars. They are the exact same stars that the Neanderthals looked at from the mouths of their caves in Spain. They are the same stars that Homo naledi might have caught a glimpse of through a crack in the ceiling of the naledi chamber. They are the same stars that guided the first Homo sapiens sailors across the black waters of the Pacific. The observers have changed. The bodies have morphed. The brains have rewired. The cultures have risen and fallen like the tides. But the lineage is unbroken. The fire that was struck in the deep Pleistocene is still burning. It is burning in your mind. It is burning in our cities. It is burning in the robotic probes we hurl into the void. We are the ghosts, and we are the future. We are the empty room, but we contain multitudes. The responsibility of carrying this legacy is terrifying, but it is also the greatest privilege ever bestowed upon a living creature. We have the power to ensure that the 2 million year struggle of our family was not in vain. We have the power to be the universe's memory. The earth is quiet now, but the silence is not empty. It is pregnant with the weight of everything that came before and everything that is yet to come. The grand collision is over. The age of solitude is here. What we do with this solitude will determine the fate of consciousness itself. The story of humanity does not belong to the past. It belongs to you. Make it a story worth telling. If this journey through the deep past has stirred the ghosts in your DNA, If it has changed the way you look at the stars, the earth, and a reflection in your own mirror, do not let the fire go out. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear the true, unfiltered story of where we came from. Leave a comment down below and tell me, which of our extinct cousins do you feel the deepest connection to? Are you drawn to the resilience of the Neanderthals, the mystery of the Denisovans, or the incredible adaptability of the Hobbits? Let's keep the campfire burning in the comments section. Until next time, look closer at the world around you, and remember the millions of years of survival it took just to give you this exact moment. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being a part of Earth's documentary.